Hi, folks. Thanks for joining in this afternoon. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I'm working on another quilt. You see some mess around here. I've been trimming squares. I'm making one along the lines of the pattern that I did for Jason. And so I've got a bunch of these half square triangles, and these are all the trimmed ones, including this cool fabric with the little acorns on it. And then I have, this one is going to be blues and grays and tans, and so like I have all of these that I have to trim up, and it's anyway, it's a little tedious. Usually I'm listening to the third Adrian Tchaikovsky audiobook. This one is about corvids and crows, and it has some fairy tale stuff, so that's pretty good. So but I wanted to stop and just do a little bit of a live this afternoon. Part one is sort of like this correction of the record of my most recent post, and it kind of opened the door to have a larger discussion about the tokenized commons and like what narratives that we inhabit, and sort of again that cognitive domain management. And then I also wanted to mention a little bit about just sort of managing the narrative, and some comments from this Sage Hannah Substack. I had gotten some redirects the last few days, and I think, you know, if you peep in and sort of see how people comment on the work that I'm doing, it's interesting to sort of see how people engage or don't engage with the content. But just so you know, like coming up next, probably tomorrow, I'm thinking I spent the day actually doing a lot of investigations that ended up being, going in a lot more directions than I initially thought, about the links between Children's Health Defense's California chapter office and Scientology. And I had known about that through Lee Dundas. Quite a few people have talked about Lee Dundas. She was one of the founding trustees at the California chapter of Children's Health Defense. But also through this gentleman, Michael Baum, and then also the involvement of the Nation of Islam in early, in terms of advocacy, like the intersection of the Nation of Islam and Scientology, and that some of these characters are sort of connected to the new film effort of Children's Health Defense, and sort of the role that they played in that 2015 sort of pushback against the legislation removing the religious exemption. So I have all of this bubbling on in the background, but I before I got into that, I did want to just sort of take a moment to clear the record and talk a little bit about sort of how narratives are structured in ways that sort of control where we look. And, I don't know, yesterday somebody was asking me, they said something about like, oh, have you looked into Shoshana Zuboff or been in touch with Shoshana Zuboff? And, I said, honestly, her focus is surveillance capitalism, right? And, she's an emeritus professor of the Harvard Business School, and likely is not the emeritus professor of the Harvard Business School is not going to tell you the whole deal of this game, right? They're going to have you talk about surveillance, right? And I feel like where we've gotten to now over the last couple years, there's a lot of focus on censorship, right? And misinformation and censorship and sort of control over these platforms. And what's generally not foregrounded in either of those discussions, whether it's like the censorship, deplatforming discussion, or the false news discussion, is that what we're moving into is a world that is one where our lived experience is increasingly mediated by the digital technology, not just something that's going to be in this laptop screen or on our phone, but that's going to be immersive in extended reality. I was talking, one of the first people to really talk about the metaverse, not as meta, but as augmented reality and spatial computing. And that all of that is going to be tokenized, right? And so this idea of having privacy or being censorship proof or these different things, if we're talking about them and we're not talking about what it will mean to live in a smart contract protocol layer, the idea of having privacy or having these certain rights within the token economy, I think we're just missing the mark. And so anyway, so some of the stuff I want to talk about a little bit with, like, Whitney Webb had a correction regarding the nature. And I don't know, honestly, if it actually was Whitney Webb. It was someone who said they were Whitney Webb, but on a comment about the nature of her talk that she's giving at the Miami Bitcoin conference next week or so. So I wanted to make that correction. And then I also wanted just to touch a little bit at the beginning about sort of this cognitive domain management. So I'm going to get around to the Scientology stuff in the next day or so. And I've been collaborating with some folks who've shared some pretty amazing information with me that I'm happy to get out. But I didn't want to mix and match the two things. So for now, I'm just going to focus on the tokenized commons and really pulling back in some older clips that I had and some site visits that I've done, and to kind of rehash not for titillation's sake, but because it actually, I think it's a useful lesson in understanding the things that are discussed and not discussed around this sort of video thing that Whitney Webb did on Slow News Day in like the summer of 2021. And it had to do with the deplatforming and the use of blockchain media as the new economics. And I think that this is important going forward in terms of understanding. Children's Health Defense has pursued quite a bit of litigation around censorship, which is kind of outside the jurisdiction of its mission, which is really to eliminate environmental exposures for children, right? So the censorship narrative focus, and quite a lot of money was spent on litigating those issues unsuccessfully for the most part, was about, I think, securing a brand in a digital space. And the securing a brand in a digital space, I think now in retrospect, we can look back and go, well, maybe that had to do with like the political aspirations of individuals in said organization, right? That you would stretch into this space of First Amendment. And for the most part, people would say, I think that's great. I'm glad someone's advocating against censorship on these platforms. But it is beyond the mission. And for the most part, that kind of litigation isn't questioning us moving into a tokenized commons, which when Robert F. Kennedy says what we want is non-crony capitalism and we want fair market capitalism and what we want is an ecology of currencies, really what's behind that, whether he understands it or not, is ushering us into a world of extended reality that's run on tokens. Okay, and I know that that's really difficult for people to understand for the most part. People are not getting the token conversation. And I just want to point out again, this is, again, I got some redirects from Sage Hannah's Substack, and someone, Catastrophe 2021, wrote on May 12th, so it's been 3 days ago, on a post that was made on Sage Hannah. And it was, again, sort of about Children's Health Defense, but not surfacing any of the things that I've been surfacing, certainly not Andrew Peck. The person says, did you see Alison McDowell's post today? And the response from Sage Hannah, I did not. Care to summarize a bit? She is so advanced, I lock up immediately, to be honest. And then the person summarizes and said, just posted it, just how RFK Jr. is the knight in shining armor who will usher in Web3 blockchain stuff, and Whitney Webb and Derek Bros are palling around with him. So it's kind of that, but I would say that's a surface level look. And if this is a person who is building a brand identity around poking the hornet's nest around the hero worship, and particularly churning out a lot of posts around Children's Health Defense, it's kind of an interesting take that this person, group of people, whatever, says that I am too advanced, and then they just shut down. And so, I would question that, right? Because what that says for people who are maybe not familiar with my work is that, it's too hard. Because here, I'm the expert here on this Substack, and it's too hard for you. So don't really go bother looking at it. Just stay here in my Substack because we all know each other here, and it's not going to be too challenging for you, right? And so I think that that's a stigmergic signal there. And then why, if you were someone who's writing regularly on Children's Health Defense and Malone and these various people. Now, I'm not really talking about Malone, but the structure is what I'm looking at. Why would you not just say, that's interesting. I'll make a point of going over and checking that out. And then it continues. The person says, this is the person who mentioned my post. And again, I'm grateful for that. But their response was, Allison's thing. Now, again, this is framing it as my thing. It's not my thing, it's the thing. What we're dealing with is cybernetic tokenomics. Allison's thing seems to be that blockchain and quote unquote tokenization is part of the overall transhumanist agenda. At least that's as much as my tiny brain can surmise. And again, that is this self-deprecating, like, oh, I'm ignorant, I can't know the things. And I'm like, no, you can know it, right? And so when people, and I think that this is just maybe a natural proclivity, that people are trying to take a stab at it, but then they're reticent and they want to be like, but I don't know, maybe I could have gotten it wrong. And again, people who aren't boastful about that, like, I can see that, but at the same time, the emphasis there is that most people aren't going to be able to figure it out. It's too difficult. And I think that that serves the system by encouraging people to say, you can't figure it out. And I continue to be frustrated because when all of these things unfolded 3 years ago, many people who otherwise didn't have much of a background in public policy or health economics or these other things, particular very specific, biophysics and nanotechnology and all these things, like they dove in, right? And they educated themselves. But somehow this piece of the story remains off limits. Right? People say, okay, you could understand nanotechnology, but you can't understand tokenomics. And I don't get that because most of the work that I do, I mean, all of my work really, I document. I create resources, I have screenshots, I curate, I organize, and then I provide it free of charge to people. So what I'm saying is I need for people to step and take responsibility for the next phase of their education, which is the cybernetics and the tokenomics. And again, there's a small group of people who are working on that. And like Jason has been doing more presentations on his YouTube. So I would say if you don't know about Jason's YouTube, it's Argus Fest on YouTube, ARGUSFEST. So, subscribe over there. So that's good, but we need more and more voices. And so then it sort of goes on to say, well, this is the person, my work is long and you have to devote some time to learning. And yes, this is Sandra. This is Sandra who inadvertently catalyzed the whole Celia Farber Tempest in a Teapot. But yeah, so Sandra's like, yeah, no, you have to actually devote some time to it. This isn't a soundbite. And then she put together a whole lot of stuff, which is great. And then it goes on a little bit further down, and someone is looking at Sandra, what she compiled a lot of information, and then he just said, well, I will take a look, but you need to work on making things compact. One sentence for each link. And then the person's like, okay, well, you kind of did that, so thanks. And then the next person says, well, I'm not up for reading anything, but I think you got it, right? And again, we're saying, like, I'm asking people to be responsible, and you're just at the same time saying, I can't do it. Like, I don't want to take time. And yet these are people who would probably spend hours on these Substacks, floating from Substack to Substack. So I'm just saying, this is how things get hidden in plain view, is that incidentally, we come into the club and then the club says this isn't important or it's too hard and you won't be able to get it. So let's just stay in our comfort zone, right? And I'm saying you have to stretch out of your comfort zone. And, one of the other things that came up, and this is just ad hominem, but on Twitter, someone had said, oh, are you familiar with Alison McDowell's research? And the person replied, oh, I think I've seen some of the stuff, but actually I thought that was a man. I mean, and this is where all you people who are doing the culture war stuff, oh, I think I saw a bump on the dress, or I think I saw a this or a that, or let's speculate, maybe the Adam's apple. Like, it's ridiculous. It's idiotic. It makes you look like idiots, right? Like, you're being led around by the nose by a triggering thing that totally is distracting from the reality, right? Like, and you can't take my identity from me. I'm sorry. Like, I'm a mom in Philadelphia who quilts and picks flowers, and I'm not a man. It doesn't really matter if I'm a woman or a man. Like, that is something that people do to distract. And then, unfortunately, the person instead have said, well, that's a stupid comment. Like, what are you even talking about? They're like, oh yeah, no, I don't really like how she looks either, or something like that, which is just dumb. Like, I have so many people on here who will, like, on the one hand, and Bill Houston was one of them. I don't really like Allison at all. She's crazy, but she's doing a good job on this RFK Jr. thing, right? And so what I'm saying is, like, come on, guys, grow up. This is no longer middle school. It matters. Do the homework. Like, don't do it because I'm telling you to do it, but do it because it's the right thing to do for your conscience and for actually understanding and sense making. So Anyway, I just want to sort of lay that out because in today's note about cognitive domain management, following Substackers who are saying it's too hard and you won't get it, or listening to people who want to go ad hominem and just say, I don't like that person's looks. Like, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have someone here doing my makeup. Like, I'm not a hot, cute young thing. I'm just me. But I have a really good mind and I'm really diligent and I have a really good heart, right? So I'm not here to please people who would be operating at that superficial level. And I would say to continue to inhabit that space is to dehumanize yourself. And that's actually doing the work for the system more so than other people. So, okay. So this is my, this was the article I put out a couple days ago. Again, I had done a live stream talking about Robert F. Kennedy and some of the updates about my concerns about him keynoting at this Bitcoin conference. And part of that was, I did a little write-up of it, and I mentioned that Whitney Webb was going to be at the conference. And so I will admit, I took a stab based on her presentation at Children's Health Defense, which was around censorship. I figured at Bitcoin, she had done an article from Bitcoin Magazine earlier that summer, last summer of 2022, on that topic of dissent, closing down dissent. I said, well, she's probably talking about that. Well, it turns out that she's not. She's talking about like financial privacy or something like that. So just to stand to be corrected, this was from someone who identifies as cool 22 fire on YouTube. And so I don't know who this person is. They did have a lot of subscriptions, so it wasn't a total sock puppet account. And I don't know why Whitney Webb, since she has my email, wouldn't just email me for clarification. But I'll read you the comment and for what it's worth. So again, my initial post was that Whitney Webb was going to be at the Bitcoin Miami conference along with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I speculated that she would be speaking about censorship in blockchain. Okay, which evidently is incorrect. She's speaking on something else. So this is the quote from Cool 22 Fire. Can someone inform Alison McDowell that my speech last year didn't promote blockchain once and was instead a criticism of online censorship and how it is a war on dissent? She links to it, so she should know. Also, my speech next week is on the World Economic Forum Partnership Against Cybercrime and how it is a major intelligence-driven effort to destroy financial privacy. These are important topics, and Alison misstating my views to fit the narrative in her latest post, really more of a smear to be honest, is unprofessional and dishonest. I speak to the Bitcoin community, but I do not publicly endorse crypto or Bitcoin as the solution to our problems, and anyone who regularly follows my work will know this. However, I still think it is important to reach out to all different audiences, regardless of whether or not they use and like Bitcoin. More division seems unnecessary to me. Whitney Webb in brackets. Hey, Alison, Whitney is not the enemy. You be hunting enemies all the time till even friends become enemies, ? Okay. And so this was my reply. I said, I would be happy to add the title of Webb's talk at Bitcoin Miami 2023. Is there a title prepared? Also, I see nothing on this profile that confirms Whitney Webb's identity. If you'd like to send an email to me at teamsela@protonmail.com from the info@unlimitedhangout.com address you used to contact me previously, I'd be more than happy to add that information. As far as Whitney's support of blockchain media platforms, this video, which implies I only started to oppose blockchain in order to smear Webb and her colleagues, shows the limits of her investigative reporting. A quick search of my blog shows that I've been writing in opposition to blockchain since 2017. If people are unsure about the backstory on this, please read the description in the video. And then I have the clip that I had documented. So I want to just take a minute and sort of talk about the framing of this, okay? So my contention is that the entire deplatforming narrative, and like I will say, I'm on YouTube, so I'm not saying that things are perfect. There are definitely problems with censorship, but again, it's problem, reaction, solution, right? And so at this point, I'm still sticking with my original YouTube account because you can go back and see me testifying in front of City Council and the School Reform Commission in Philadelphia. And if people want to pretend that I'm somebody else, that I'm not who I am. Like, you can literally look at my very informal record going back to like 2016, my very first videos and my little torn pieces of paper, and see like my trajectory, right? It's there. Now, it's not perfect, and I don't monetize my YouTube channel. They do put some stupid ads on there, but I don't like monetize it at all. This is all made available at no cost to everybody because I can, and I think it's important that people have this information. I'm not comfortable with any of the blockchain platforms. And, I was going up against Derek Bros and John Bush early on, and they were pushing like library and then these other tokenized media things. And so people, I think, who are out there, who are using these tokenized media, like, you'll see how the tokenization works, right? And I think in many respects, then, Rockfin came on the scene, and that became this sort of point of contention with Whitney Webb, because she was one of the earlier adopters of that platform. And then, it kind of fell in line like dominoes, right? Like boom, 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 boom. Like all of a sudden, like many of the influencers ended up at least having some kind of presence on Rockfin, which is fundamentally a blockchain media platform. And I knew from my background in looking at where things were going with platform media and blockchain micropayments that I didn't want to have any part of that, right? So I think very temporarily I made one, maybe it was an Odyssey account for like a day, and then I decided to delete it, and then they made a big deal about that. But like, I just decided on principle that this isn't what I'm doing. But essentially, you can't say that you're not promoting blockchain when your livelihood, which I'll touch on in a bit in this clip that she made in the summer of 2021, is reliant on the blockchain platform. Like, you don't have to come right out and say, I'm talking about censorship and dissent, but I'm not gonna really address that the new model is tokenized blockchain media, and then explore what the implications are for that. Because in the future, it's not just going to be consuming media through a video, but it's going to involve immersive technology, haptics, and all sorts of other things. And the media people are going to be consuming aren't just going to be, smart investigative reporting. They're going to be all sorts of gamified, titillating, group dynamic sorts of things, right? There's going to be a lot of different kinds of immersive media out there, like beyond just that. So, what I want to point out is when Robert F. Kennedy and Whitney Webb are going to present to Bitcoin, I'm not policing to say you can't not, that you have to limit who you speak to. But at the same time, where you put yourself in alignment builds up that brand, right? I mean, unless you show up to the event and you actually try to critique it, you're essentially adding on to the brand, like through your proximity to that brand, right? And so I've been at this point, I'm not doing interviews with any other people because I've been burned. There are many associations that I had initially because I thought people were operating from a certain space, and it turns out we were not at all in the same space. And if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do it, but you live and learn, right? And so every time you agree to be on someone's podcast, go to someone's webinar, accept someone's sponsorship, do some sort of affiliate marketing, and this is not just limited to web, but all of these influencers, it matters because that's how this new tokenization relationship is going to go, right? So if you're talking about censorship and dissent, but you're not bringing up this idea of the new economy is fully tokenized, right? That the new economic paradigm that has been adopted is based in a subscription model tokenization of everything, right? I don't see most of the influencers who've migrated onto blockchain platforms saying, I want to defend the right of the commons on these other big platforms like YouTube because I'd like to leave this payment model and go back to the other one, right? So the ship has sailed, and they have sailed right into the blockchain land, the token land. So you don't actually have to be super obvious about your support if it is known that you are an influencer who is making their living from a blockchain or distributed ledger technology platform. And so the other thing is, so if the speech is, so it says the speech is about, so they don't give the title, they just say what it's about: the World Economic Forum Partnership Against Cybercrime. and how is an intelligence-driven effort to destroy financial privacy. Okay, so again, the centering is on World Economic Forum. Now we know that's kind of where they want to keep everybody's attention, is on the World Economic Forum. Her focus is very much like intelligence and deep state. But if you listen to me, you'll know that actually a lot of the things that are going to be running on tokens involve things like religious institutions and nonprofits, including ones that might be encouraging everyone to filter their money through donor advised funds and crypto, right? It's not just the intelligence community that's the problem. The tokenized commons is going to involve everything across the board. It's going to be governments providing the access point. It's going to be investors, global investors in you and humans and nature as capital through tokenization. It's going to be social welfare delivery organizations, which are sometimes going to be religious, sometimes are going to be straight up nonprofit. And then it's going to be the academic institutions and the credentialed experts who are all leaning in to like create the equations for the impact finance, right? And then it's going to be all the data analysts who are hoovering up the impact data to create a better, more humanized AI. So again, I'm not saying that she's certainly entitled to tell that story. And that's a story that resonates with a lot of people, right? Like, oh, what's the newest thing about World Economic Forum? And bad, right? What's the new thing about deep state? Bad. And actually the intelligence community and sort of that whole narrative really feeds into this Kennedy legacy, right? Oh, look, it's the deep state all the way back, and it's been bad for so long. And thank God the general public is finally figuring it out. Only what we're going to be dealing with isn't limited to the deep state at all. It's about global systems engineering, and the stuff about Epstein that I find far more compelling is his connection to Santa Fe Institute regards to complexity theory and game theory, and his donations to Harvard around like the sociobiology. Like that's in my opinion where more people should be spending their time. So and then the other piece is the financial privacy. Now, in the token world, there's all going to be all kinds of tokens, right? Some are going to be money-ish. Some are going to be votes. Some are going to be tied into civic participation, civic gaming. Some of these tokens are going to be linked to your smart appliances. Some of these tokens are going to be to your smart gig economy jobs. Some of these tokens might be connected to civic infrastructure like public transportation or your ability to participate in certain events. And everything is going to be verified by having a digital wallet. And so what I'm trying to emphasize is like there's different structures, right? I'm not trying to be mean or say that you have to buy into the story that I'm telling when you want to like spend your time on the deep state and financial crypto privacy. Yeah, they're both stories, right? But I would say maybe you should make room to hold both and figure out which ones you find most relevant to your immediate life. Because if what they're talking about is the World Economic Forum threatening your financial privacy, and I will say that financial privacy, again, really dovetails into the whole Children's Health Defense not opening up their any data about their $16 million budget in 2021, right? In terms of showing very openly that they don't want anyone to know who turned on the tap for those millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, that's another kind of financial privacy, but is that what we want too? Like, is it all financial privacy? Is that how it's going to work? So anyway, so that was just to clarify the record. So I made the adjustment. I updated the speech, in the thing. I'm saying it now. So, I will, I apologize, Whitney, for overreaching. I shouldn't have said that speculated on what you were probably talking about. Thank you for clarifying that. I have updated it in the written section, and I'm updating it here. I do, though, think that it is important for people who are navigating this terrain to understand where their attention is being directed. And while you are directing it at the World Economic Forum and financial privacy, I, in this game, am trying to direct people towards the implication of living in a world governed by tokenomics, not just in money, but through zero knowledge proofs in the Internet of Everything. And as long as we're just limiting the conversation to dissent and censorship and surveillance and misinformation or disinformation or all of that, we're never actually going to get to, like, do we want to live in a world governed by tokens? And that's the protocol layer, right? And y'all still aren't talking about the protocol layer. We're still trying to pretend like most of this is still about money in a wallet, and it's about much, much more than money in a wallet. Okay, so, and again, you can see in this comment, there's a distancing, right? There's a distancing there. So she's essentially saying that, like, my misstating, and again, I will own my misstatement. I said that she was probably talking about blockchain being an answer to censorship. And that was incorrect. So now she's talking about Bitcoin, I guess, being an answer to respond to the threat to financial privacy. She did talk about censorship, but she didn't talk about blockchain. And that's interesting because clearly that's the answer that's being posed for censorship, is like, once you have blockchain, then you don't have to worry about censorship. So if you're going to give a whole speech about censorship at the Children's Health Defense annual conference, why wouldn't you also mention about blockchain, unless you're trying to keep it at arm's length, right? And the same, I speak to the Bitcoin community, but I don't endorse crypto or Bitcoin. And I would say, again, where you are in alignment publicly, that rubs off by proximity. So this is from Bitcoin Magazine, and it has a big feature photo of Smiley Whitney, and writer and researcher for Unlimited Hangout and Last American Vagabond. I cover intelligence, tech, surveillance, and civil liberties. And again, she does a very good job on those things. I would say if we limit ourselves to intelligence, tech, surveillance, and civil liberties, unless we can expand the tech to include the Web3, that's not going to get us where we need to go. And so mostly her one article, and I correct me if I'm wrong, I thought she had this pinned as her pinned post on Twitter for quite a long time. This was from last summer, 2022, and this was a whole special article in Bitcoin Magazine, specifically on censorship. And so her feature, it says, "The War on Dissent. Online censorship is becoming increasingly normalized as growing restrictions, deplatforming, and its other manifestations have become so pervasive that many have simply come to accept it." And that's July 20th, 2022. So again, the context for the deplatforming and censorship is situated within Bitcoin Magazine and their thematic issue on that topic. And then you'll see that there's the Defender. So again, prominently featured on their website. This was from their conference in Tennessee. And again, it's if you're listening in, the feature photo is a bald eagle with a waving flag. And this was from October 27th, 2022. Whitney Webb, quote, "They may deplatform the truth, but their lies and distortions will never replace it." Thankfully for government agencies seeking to weaponize the truth and stamp out dissent, the truth is not as easily manipulated and distorted as they may think. And so, I think it's worthwhile asking a little bit about truth, like, what is the truth, right? Do we know? I mean, because I've kind of come to realize that, there's information out there that is patently not factual or runs counter to understood fact. But a lot of the crafting of the truth is really centered on this cognitive domain management, on knowledge management, on what sets of facts are you looking at and what sets of facts are you leaving out, right? So that curation is what's going to happen on the protocol layer. Your truth is only what you've been exposed to. So, for instance, back when I was growing up in, the late 60s and early 70s, and I hadn't been anywhere outside the country, and I didn't really know anything besides my family and what they told me in school and what was on Sesame Street or whatever. Like, the truth in that is much simpler because you don't have lived experience to compare against it. And then now we have so much information, it's hard to define, to ascertain what the truth is. And then so much of the truth is missing, right? Because we don't have all the facts. If we had more information and more time to process it and less noise, then we might come to different understandings about what the truth actually is. For me, looking into this, it's all about peeling back onions and understanding with more and more granularity and complexity what I think is going on, but I don't admit that I have the whole truth. So this idea that somehow if the quest for the truth, I don't know. It's an interesting philosophical argument to have. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter what the truth is. And I think, but a lot of it's based on your lived experience, right? We should definitely endeavor to go to as many primary sources as possible and not take somebody else's word for it, and to base it and ground it in our own intuition and our own reality. But the truth is a very, very slippery thing. And I think the Web3 people are going to try to tell you that they're going to give you the truth. They're going to create some decentralized consensus mechanism to decide what's true and what's not true. But I don't think that this decentralized platform, actually, I really do feel like the entire misinformation program is going to run very deeply on Web3, because even though they might not be able to erase it, they'll be able to obscure things in ways even on the blockchain platforms. So anyway, that's sort of where I'm at on the truth. And then, so this is the agenda page for the Bitcoin 2023 conference that I think is next week, maybe. And again, RF Kennedy Jr. and Whitney are going to be there. And remember, so she said, or the person who said was relaying it on her behalf, and I'm presuming that this is accurate. I said in my blog post, if someone wanted to correct the record, they could. The speech is about the World Economic Partnership against cybercrime and how it is a major intelligence-driven effort to destroy financial privacy. And I did say, can you send me the title? I'd love to find it. Now, I only just found the title this afternoon, but this is the title on the website, 11:30 a.m. Friday. Keynote speech, Whitney Webb, Bitcoin and the Plot to Destroy Financial Privacy. It's a 30-minute talk. So, as much as she would like to sort of say, I'm keeping things at arm's length and I'm not really promoting or endorsing Bitcoin or crypto, and again, we haven't heard the speech yet. I'm not sure, what she's going to say in that 30 minutes, but I think anyone who is a supporter of Bitcoin, you would read that title and you wouldn't feel like she has any skepticism about Bitcoin as a solution. I mean, literally, Bitcoin is in the title. And the way it's structured, right, there's a plot to destroy financial privacy, and then we're supposed to consider Bitcoin's role in the solution to that, right? And to me, is that the conversation we all should be having right now? Is, do we like Bitcoin? What are our other cryptocurrencies? How do we protect our financial privacy? And to have that conversation to the exclusion of the conversation of, do we want to live in a tokenized world? So, I just want to point that out. And then this is a clip that I pulled off of. This is from Swan Bitcoin. It was 3 weeks ago. So this is clearly made in the lead up to this event, and it's just 30 seconds. So I'll play this for you. So again, her position is that I'm not endorsing crypto. I'm not endorsing Bitcoin. I simply want for people, I like to talk to lots of different kinds of people, and I like to have a big audience, and we shouldn't choose. And what I'm saying is, how you align your digital brand does matter in terms of the perception of the organizations that you align with. And so unless you're actually saying something like, I'm not for this, or I have questions about this, people are going to presume that if you're in alignment with that's an endorsement.
Their main tool is fear. What we could see could be truly unprecedented stuff, like efforts to completely illegalize the use of Bitcoin as a currency. Now, would that actually be able to work? It depends on how they do it, and it depends on how successful this dragnet of surveillance and this effort to completely upend privacy, how it actually goes. I do really like the ethos of a lot of Bitcoiners, because they really are at the frontier of fighting a lot of these encroachments on basically what is the end of privacy for Americans. Their main...
Okay, so, essentially, she's specifically talking about Bitcoin here. It's not about the idea of distributed ledger technology or cryptocurrency. I mean, it's specifically, and again, this I'm assuming that Swan Bitcoin like overlaid her speech with these images, that this wasn't something that she personally did, and their interest is to promote Bitcoin and Bitcoin wallets and exchanges and that sort of thing. But the narrative is specifically around Bitcoin. And again, the admiration, can they outlaw it, right? Well, they're not going to. I mean, ultimately, Bitcoin is the Trojan horse for all of the other tokens. And RFK Jr. has been speaking about that. Like, we need an ecology of currency, which are going to be the tokens. So, this idea of, I really do like the ethos of a lot of the Bitcoiners, right? So yeah, that's an endorsement. I like the ethos of the Bitcoiners because they're on the front line of this. So yeah, again, she's perfectly entitled to have that position. But then the statement that you don't endorse, or you're very measured, I think is a bit disingenuous, honestly, Whitney. And then to imply that, again, I will admit that I shouldn't have presumed the title of your talk, but that distancing, that stating, I speak to the Bitcoin community, but I do not publicly endorse crypto or Bitcoin as the solution to our problems. Yeah, she's not exactly saying it's the solution, but she's saying she admires the Bitcoin people because they're fighting for financial privacy. So, it's kind of a slippery slope in my opinion. So I'm going to take a second and play this. And again, I don't love to get into all of these like spats, but I think I wanted to talk about this today because I wanted to say the discussion around censorship and deplatforming and also financial privacy essentially presumes we've agreed to live in a tokenized world of the outside-in robot. And it's just how we're going to do it, right? How that's going to all unfold. And I would say I haven't agreed to that yet. And I think we should be pushing back on that presumption that economic model is actually desirable. And so this is, it's 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and play the whole thing. This is from her Vimeo channel, and I had a screenshot of it. It was initially put out, the date is May 5th, May 23rd, 2021. And the title of it on her own Vimeo channel was called Whitney Webb on Bitcoin. So, again, if you're distancing yourself from Bitcoin, like, I don't know, like the topic is Bitcoin. And she doesn't use my name here, but it's me. And essentially, this was coming up because at the time, early on in the lockdowns, I was one of the few people speaking out against blockchain. And I was doing so, and if you guys who follow me, you'll know my exposure was looking at this technology as a way to track preschoolers in South Africa for social credit, and then also to be linked to biometric identity on Syrian refugees. It wasn't trading crypto. It wasn't an economic thing. I was actually looking at the end game of the protocol layer, which is managing human and natural capital. And I knew that it was wrong, that inherently this was the next version of digital slavery. It didn't really even have to do with crypto versus central bank digital currency. It had to do with the digital identity and the smart contracts. And I was very emphatic about that because it actually matters. And I would say at this point, there are still a relatively few people who are willing to state openly that this is what the problem is. And so at the time, Raul Diego, who was, they were colleagues, and he had developed her web platform, and there was this situation with a wallet, a Rockfin wallet that was involved, and something had gone wrong, and I was one of the few people speaking out, and so he reached out to me, and I said, well, let's figure this out, because I understand many of these wallets are hackable. And at the time, even, I knew that there were a lot of these speculative markets in like celebrity culture where they were literally like taking out futures bets on people's reputations. And my initial inclination was maybe something had happened, that they were trying to drive down or create some sort of drama around their relationship to create some sort of speculative pricing mechanism or something like that. So we were trying to figure out what had happened. And I don't want to get into all the nuances. I will just say that everybody who works in these blockchain spaces knows that your private key, your wallet, that's the most important thing to keep. And you really should never put that in. You should keep that only exclusive to yourself, especially like if you're an independent business person whose blockchain media is your business, that's what you do, right? But decisions were made there that essentially put everyone in a compromised position. And so looking at that wallet situation and trying to figure out what happened, like that's where I was. And at the time, Raul was really the only person they were both still at Mint Press, who actually had taken a strong stand to write about social impact finance. And he's still one of the only people who's written about social impact finance. He wrote 2 pieces, The Bits and Bytes of Silicon Icarus, and then he wrote another piece, which was super important, exposing Ronald Cohen. And then after that, it sort of fell apart, at that point. And he left, and then he started his own venture, which is Silicon Icarus. And at the time, he said, would you like to be, part of this effort that I'm making? And I'm like, sure, I don't mind as long as people are using my content in an appropriate way, that it be there, right? But it wasn't a big thing. It was just people collaborating on these issues at hand, which was understanding Web3 and tokenization. And, Raul and I have since gone our separate ways, but he's still publishing his own work and the work of Leo Saraceno, whose research is really critical in the space, especially around the tokenization of natural capital. And so essentially, she used that opportunity to try to drive her own brand. And that's what I want to point out about these online media spaces is they're built on titillation and emotional outrage and polarization and not healthy behaviors. And so in this, even though she doesn't use my name, she's talking about me. And the implication here, and I'll play it in a second, is that I only started to talk negatively about blockchain to harm the reputation of her and the people around her, colleagues, essentially her friends, including Derek Bros. And I'd have my own beefs with Derek Bros, but had nothing to do with her. It had to do with understanding the true nature of the blockchain technologies. So at the time, really the only thing that I was weighing in on was the fact that that she had lied about me, like that specific aspect of saying that I hadn't been working, like opposing blockchain far years before I even knew who she was. I said, listen, I need people to understand that she lied about me and she used it for a certain purpose for her platform. And I actually have some emails that I'm going to read from the summer of 2020, where she had reached out to me to write on some educational topics. And then ultimately it didn't go anywhere and she never followed up. But it was this initial outreach, and at the time, Vanessa Beeley had made an early outreach to me, and I was begging her to talk about the IBM platform with Sesame Workshop and the ed tech with the Syrian refugee kids and that pilot, and that never happened. And so I think a lot of this stuff, they try to feel people out and see if they can get you in the clique. And then if you're in the clique, you're not going to go against the clique, right? And I've never been part of anybody's clique. So I'll just read, this is what I put on the clip that is being played. So I said, I am saving this for archival purposes because people still don't get that these people lied about me. I wonder what this crew has to say about Bros' support of play-to-earn crypto gaming for children in the global south. I oppose blockchain media. I have been researching the negative aspects of blockchain since 2017. I would not go on their Rockfin show, this is the Slow News Day people, because it is against my principles. I did offer to answer that guy's questions if he had any as a courtesy. I don't feed into spectacle. The only contact I had with Webb was in September of 2020 when she asked me to write for her, and I pitched a story about blockchain government in Rhode Island related to her Israel research. People need to get clear about who they align with moving forward. If you condone the behavior on display here, juvenile voyeurism, if you condone the token-based attention economy, if you sit silently by and let people like Bros promote child digital labor under the pretense that it's liberating, please do me a favor and stop following my work. I'm not about any of that. You're going to have to choose. And I think that's the hard thing for people, is that they're trying to hold conflicting things at the same time. And, I'm fine if you don't want to follow my work, or, you'd prefer to buy Bitcoin and secure your financial security with these crypto tokens and play crypto play to earn games or whatever. Like, I just rather not know about it. You're not my audience, okay? So this is an email that was sent on Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. Hey, Allison, I hope this email finds you well. I was recently turned on to your work by a few of my supporters on Patreon and my good friend and colleague Vanessa Beeley. I wanted to see if you'd be potentially interested in contributing to my site, unlimitedhangout.com, with something related to the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution. My colleague Raul Diego and I, who run Unlimited Hangout, also cover 4IR issues, but since the topic is so vast and timely, we are looking for a small handful of contributors who could help us expose aspects of this agenda that are drastically undercovered, even by independent media, before the deplatforming wave is fully upon us. Okay, so she knew that deplatforming was coming. Would you be interested in writing an investigation for us? One area we haven't been able to cover yet, but are interested in helping exposed, is the educational aspect of the 4IR and how the COVID-19 situation has been used to implement a lot of pre-existing plans and products funded by Gates, among other billionaires. Let me know if you might be interested and we can set up time to talk. Thanks for your time, Whitney. And then I replied, shortly thereafter, hi, Whitney, thanks for reaching out. I have kind of a crazy week coming up, heading home to take care of some things with my elderly parents tomorrow first thing. I am back next Tuesday. Can it wait until then? My cell/signal is, and then I put my number. I actually have some thoughts about what is happening in Rhode Island, which has been targeted by Zuckerberg as the personalized learning state. The state's COVID reopen is being managed in close partnership with the Israeli Health Department, and the state is moving towards blockchain ID, and I included a link. I've been pulling together information on this webinar, which intersects with some of your recent work. And then I have the entry on Little Sis about the Rhode Island digital government during pandemic webinar. If you want, I can send you some links to some of my related writings. Not sure how much time you have to spend on this. Best, Allison. And then her reply, not sure if you saw this article of mine, but I wrote about the very Israeli company at the heart of what is going on in Rhode Island, Diagnostic Robotics. Here is the link. I think you will find it of interest. And then she had the link from Last American Vagabond. Meet Israeli intelligence leaked firm using AI profile Americans guide U.S. lockdown policy. And yes, next week is absolutely fine. There is no rush at all. Just wanted to see if you'd be interested in contributing sometime in the future, smiley face. I'll reach out to you on Signal at some point soon. Thanks for your response and take care. And then I followed up and I said, yes, if you watch the webinar, there is a great deal of time spent on plans to set up blockchain digital government, digital ID in Rhode Island. This is not just about surveillance, but about human capital data markets. They are working with Infosys and modeling it after Estonia. Once the blockchain ID is set up under the cover of health passports, they can begin to layer in other social investment deals like digital vouchers tied to quote-unquote education and workforce training, pay for success deals. Dallas and Tulsa both have blockchain transcript programs already underway. Be sure to scroll to the end for the Deep State Dallas photos. And I included the link. I wrote this on EdTech and the blended learning model in 2017. Rhode Island is an incubator for Boston Tech, much of it with ties to Israel and the military. And then I had the link to that. And I said, best, Allison. And then I said, I never heard from Whitney Webb again until she went on her tirade 9 months later. Right. And so I just want to make it very clear that I was always talking about digital identity and pay for success finance and blockchain platforms. So I'm going to go ahead and play this now.
Almost like there's, well, I'm not going to get too.
I mean, dude, I think we've been kind of pulled into that too. So like, I don't mind addressing it because it's ridiculous. Look, if you're going to set a fence around the only people who are even trying to get this conversation out into larger spaces and say that you can't listen to like half or 3/4 or a third of the people who are giving this information because they've failed one purity test.
So that's the focus of them all being on blockchain media. The deplatforming was to put them onto blockchain media so that we could advance the tokenized media economy.
Well, maybe those people want to be the only voices.
Yeah,
and want people not to listen to a variety of voices talking about these topics, but just their voice.
And that's very clear. Anybody that listens to me knows that I'm not trying to be the only voice.
It is very true that in this space, there are a lot of people that are motivated, by egocentric stuff, or they want to be in front. It's about them and their brand.
And I don't have a brand, just to be clear, unless it's like dandelions and quilting.
And all of this stuff, or they feel like they should have more views or engagement than they do. And so they want to take a shot at other people. And we should really all be working together. I want to give a lot of credit to Derek Bros in that space, who got shit on massively, and that was not deserved. And instead of doing that back to that person, he instead went and tried to have a dialogue with that person that was denied. And so he tried to have a broader conversation, incorporating that. So
this is Derek promoting the blockchain situation. And there's a lot of people who were in the blockchain space, even, like I had Mercola trying to reach out to debate me about blockchain. And the reality is that I don't want to give my attention to other platforms to just stir up emotional having a debate wasn't going to inform my position anymore. I'm very, very clear about what distributed ledger technology is. I'm probably one of the people who most understands what the actual function of the tokenomics are. So essentially, people wanting to invite me to debate them on their platforms about blockchain is actually about generating more attention onto their platform. And realistically, Derek Bros isn't going to change his position on blockchain. Mercola isn't going to change his position on blockchain. All of the influencers who are literally earning their living on a blockchain platform, they're not going to change their position. And so my framing is that for the most part, I'm appealing to people as critical thinkers, and people who can listen to different viewpoints and make their own choice. And I'm fine if you don't want to choose me, right? If you want to choose the blockchain choice, I know that what this isn't a mass movement. Again, they want a mass movement. They want everybody under their umbrella, which is that blockchain tokenomics, the blockchain media economy is good. And what I'm saying is that that's just the drop in the bucket, that the blockchain token media economy is actually the metaverse extended reality is going to be literally programming people through their optical nerve through virtual reality headsets. It's not simply going to be listening to people's podcasts. And I have some stuff to talk about that later. I know what the stakes are, and I'm not really interested in going on Derek Bros to debate him so that he can drive more traffic to because his followers, and this is the cognitive domain management, they're not going to change their opinion based on fact. At this point, everyone is in their own walled garden, speaking to their own small audience. And I'm probably the same thing, right? I'm not really trying to jump out. If you're here watching me, you probably are watching me because you think what I have to say is worthwhile for you. So this idea that somehow we're going to have a good debate and everyone is going to come away more informed, I've realized that that's not how it works. It really is about it's a team sport. And I'm not really about competitive team sports. I just figure the people who want to know and who value my opinion will come here because they know that I'm someone who understands the deeper insights about distributed ledger technologies.
That person's points in dialogue with Ryan and some other people, so people can just openly talk about this stuff. I mean, that's the only way forward in this divisive stuff. If you have to pass my purity test or you're naughty, when we're all trying to, fight the same greater evil.
So I would just say we're not all on the same side. And that gets sort of put to me recently about how dare you speak against the movement, as if there's one monolithic movement, as if we all agree what's actually happening. I don't use things. I mean, if you want to say that I have a purity test, which is I don't really align with people who do blockchain, it's kind of one or the other. You don't kind of do blockchain. It's either you're agreeing to tokenized extended reality or you're not. And I understand that the tokenized extended reality is speculative markets in managed behavioral change and consciousness engineering. So I can't go there. And none of these people are actually open to hearing that side of the argument because literally their livelihood depends on maintaining the flow of the tokens or their Ray tokens or whatever into their wallets. So there really is no way to actually have a measured conversation about it.
I think is silly at this point, frankly.
Yeah,
And it's not silly. This is actually a really serious conversation.
I'm really not worried about getting grounded right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's some real shit going on.
Yeah.
Maybe we can work on that.
Pre-crime is here. And
So the pre-crime, and that's interesting because like what's coming and what they're adopting is a tokenized version of the world. And the tokens are private property. Like, and it's in the metaverse, so it's not even private property in the material world. It's digital private property, and it's access to experience and predictive profiling, because all of the token exchanges are adding to your digital twins that are like creating the granular metadata tags. So if you're worried about pre-crime, essentially you should be avoiding this idea of a digital wallet, which is your digital twin that will be used for the predictive crime, right? And at this point, I find it hard to believe. Now, this was, maybe not when they first aired it, but at this stage, that these individuals don't know that yet, right? I think at this point, they would have to understand that the digital wallet is your digital identity, is your digital twin. And even if you can make it so-called private and you can somehow leverage the data in your wallet to top off, like get some bonus points on your UBI or something like that, that's probably not something that we should agree to. And so the entire economic model that they're advancing isn't freedom, it's hyper restricted, like capitalism. Like it's actually decentralized authoritarianism, like that's automated through a machine. And this is the conversation again, like when I go back to saying like this Sage Hannah, comment like, oh, she's too advanced, so I just can't process it or whatever. And then people are like, oh, I'm, my tiny brain can't figure it out. And, other people like, oh, I don't have time to read anything. I'm not going to read anything. And I'm like, well, then we're all in trouble, guys, because it matters that we understand about the tokenized commons.
And we're being like, oh, no, you haven't done what I like. And,
well, you're on Rockfin.
Yeah.
Motherfucker. We have
I know. You're on the wrong independent alternative platform to YouTube.
So the thing is, it's not independent. It's a company, right? It's a company that is tokenomics. And so it's disingenuous for them to say that they don't actually understand the tokenized media.
What's going on? Right.
Well,
what is
the
there?
other ones too. Like it's
Right.
not. Yeah, and look, I could honestly understand if there were people that were strictly evangelical about this one thing. I could even see a valid criticism, but that's not what's happening. Nor are any of us trying to stop anybody from doing what they do. We're not trying to stop anyone from like engaging with those folks or having a conversation with them. In fact, like we've invited them on several times and have been, shut up and told like, well, I'll have a private conversation with you.
Now, again, they're trying to make it like I have some sneaky thing. I said, on principle, I don't go on Rockfin because it's a blockchain platform. But if you have questions about my research, I'm happy to talk with you on the phone about it or email or something. But I'm not going to endorse this platform because that's against my principles. And so they're trying to make it sound like I was doing something untoward, like I was going to give them secret information or some. I mean, I don't. It's sort of ridiculous. It's sort of ridiculous.
But I will not come on your show.
Well,
Then no. I don't want to have that conversation. Like if we can't do the.
I didn't want to legitimize his platform, or give them clicks, really, because I don't believe in it.
There's
people need to
conversations
hear
that
it.
need to happen in private, and I'll do that. But like this is something that I feel like is a vital thing that vital conversation that we need to have, that we need to
just
air out.
for the record, the person who got caught stealing all my Rockfin earnings last year is the person who courted this particular person we're talking about and set up a website with them and all of this stuff. So where do you think a lot of this has come from, and why is that person gone after Derek and Ryan, and why is that person currently going after Vanessa Beeley and all of this.
Now, I didn't actually do anything to Vanessa Beeley. I had a phone conversation with her about asking her to use her platform to talk about the ed tech and the Syrian refugee children. But I never said anything about Vanessa. But I have pointed out that nothing ever happened. Nothing ever came of that conversation. And I didn't say anything about Christian. I confronted Derek on several occasions and John Bush. But it was always on topic. It was on the topic of blockchain as a solution. And it hasn't gotten any better. Like, it hasn't resolved. They haven't changed their position in any way. And I haven't changed my position in any way either, because I know even more now why it's a problem than I knew back then.
This stuff, all people I work with, I would argue it's not actually about crypto and the technology, and that this is about something very different.
So she's saying it's not about the crypto, it's about something different. And the implication is that I haven't been speaking out against blockchaining toddlers since 2017. And all she would have to do, so she's the investigative journalist, correct? If you put in blockchain on my blog and do a, oldest to newest, it goes back to 2017. And there's dozens and dozens of articles that reference my concerns about blockchain, starting with the Defense Department. So, I have a hard time believing that someone of her ostensible caliber and research skills wouldn't have done that level of due diligence at the time. And again, I just want to point out, within the context of her comment that somehow me, again, and I will own that I shouldn't have said she's probably talking about censorship in blockchain, because I didn't know for sure. It was a conjecture. I could have said she maybe was. But this idea that I was smearing her in my latest post by saying, well, she's probably talking about blockchain and censorship, which, again, it might have been an inaccuracy and it might have been an overreach on my part, but that's not necessarily smearing unless you actually don't like blockchain, right? But she's trying to keep her arms length from it, right? And it'll be interesting to see that now that Bobby's all in on crypto, if they're changing their tune, and that they'll be more open about it. And again, clearly the title of her talk is Bitcoin and the Plot to Destroy Financial Privacy. So to me, it's pretty clear that she's leaning into the idea of Bitcoin as a solution, even if she's not saying it outright.
Well, I mean, especially when said person only started going really, really hard against these people and against crypto after she did that website with said fuckwad.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, I know. So essentially it was this woman in the top corner who laid it out like, oh, she only started going hard against blockchain when after Raul had come to me to try to figure out what happened with this wallet, this hacked wallet situation. And that's not true. That's factually not true. So, I know that she's someone who does a lot of research. She has very specific topics that she covers. If those are topics of interest to you, I'm sure she covers them very well. And there's a lot of material. Clearly, she has a lot of volume in these books about, the deep state. But I would say that that's just a certain part of the elephant. Like that's a certain section. That's if you focus on all of that, you're going to miss a lot of other things. What I can say is that in this clip, these individuals lied about me. They straight up lied about me, and they've never taken it back, and they've never addressed it. So that's why I thought it was important for me to apologize and acknowledge my overreach on saying her that I didn't understand the topic of her Bitcoin talk. But I'll do that. I'll apologize. But that apology was never offered to me. And this was the first. I think she did a whole nother 3-hour podcast against me that I never listened to. So
yeah, it's unfortunate, but I don't really think it's really about crypto at the end of the day. I think it's about something else, but I think it's worth addressing the stuff that, okay, so we know that the elite want to use crypto for bad things, okay? But if you have a chance to use it now to go off grid, raise money, whatever,
right.
Or finance your life because you've been deplatformed off of other stuff, what are people supposed to do?
Okay, so this is where they're endorsing crypto, right? They're like, yes, it could be used for bad things, but pretty much I need to use this for my living, right? And again, it is what it is, but if you're going to make that choice, let's not pretend that it isn't also linked to tokenized extended reality, because it is. And to choose that means that you're choosing a lot of other things that go along with it.
Right.
You would tell people that, made some money on crypto so they can buy a plot of land and sort of eke out an existence with all this crazy stuff that's coming. You're going to...
But see, you don't actually need to hold crypto to buy land. I mean, most of the people who have crypto, like, they're holding it. It's in these wallets. It's this ephemeral pretend money. And if you have land, then you just have land. Like, then why do you need crypto? I mean, that was always my point with the Freedom Cell people, with Derek, is that you don't need, if you're going to have a local, eco village or something like that, you don't actually need crypto to do that, unless you're going to participate in global trade, or you're going to like sit in your yurt and do sign up for globotic gig work, with your digital identity. You don't actually need the blockchain to do off-grid life. You don't, there's no justification for it. It's actually kind of ridiculous. The only thing is like, essentially, I think that these freedom cells were petri dishes for these holons, right? For sort of behavioral experimentation and coordination within sort of swarms that are going to be coming for this collective intelligence.
Tell them they shouldn't have done that, and they should have just stayed in their apartment in Manhattan or whatever, and just...
Okay, so that's pretty much it.
Out in the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to make that point because, again, I'm willing to acknowledge that my error, I should have not guessed at what her talk was about. But I do think that this idea that she has this distance from crypto and she's not promoting it as a solution, and like all she wants to do is talk to diverse audiences is disingenuous. So let's see. So here is the other thing that how this fits into the CHD, because clearly, like, she's part of this, stable of influencers, right, that are under this umbrella of Children's Health Defense, is that, so a lot of money went into litigation, and not all of it was around issues of, health issues or health policy. It was about the censorship and the deplatforming. So a lot of people's money that went into Children's Health Defense went towards litigation fees. It was like the largest. I think it was far more in the last couple of years than their program and education and outreach. Litigation was the biggest piece. So I have a press release here from the summer of 2020. Children's Health Defense legal team led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. sues Facebook fact checkers Zuckerberg for government-sponsored censorship, false disparagement, and wire fraud. And again, like, I think if we all come to know it, like, we realize that Facebook is DARPA, right? Like, I'm sure they probably know Facebook is DARPA. Like, are we really fighting for that? Like, that space, that's where we want to put our resources. And again, the censorship and the deplatforming are critical to moving into the token engineering program. So again, I just want to restate these tweets from April for this one, April 29th, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We don't have fair market capitalism. We have corporate crony capitalism, where the rules are written by billionaires and incumbents and large corporations to stack the deck against the middle class. And then he goes on to say, governments should create rules that make Americans able to do well for themselves by doing good for each other, instead of forcing Americans to do well by poisoning each other and hurting each other and privatizing the commons. And so, yeah, so what he's promoting is a new kind of capitalism, right? He's not really saying it's stakeholder capitalism, but it's going to be token engineering. And it's going to be linked to impact finance, and it's going to involve a lot of billionaires outside of the reach of government to invest in people according to their behavioral profiles. And then his other quotes, or his other tweets from May 3rd is essentially totally in on crypto. He's talking about, some advocate tight control of cryptocurrencies to prevent their use by criminals, but it isn't just criminals who want privacy. So do dissidents and ordinary citizens. So if Whitney isn't saying that crypto is the answer, Bobby certainly is, right? Bobby's saying crypto is the answer to dissent. And also if you want to hide your donors. He didn't say that, but I said that. And then he talks about a biodiverse ecosystem. Just as a biodiverse ecosystem is a resilient ecosystem, so too will our economy be more resilient if it has a diverse ecology of currencies, not just a single centrally controlled one. And so my question would be, I wonder about the Bitcoin people, right? Because they would like to be the centralized crypto, right? But what he's saying is that he's talking about a token economy, a diverse token economy with many currencies that are all emitting signals for the coordination. And so what he's setting up is a new, like, he is in alignment with tokenized capitalism, with a Web3 protocol where property and investments are made in extended reality. That's exactly what he's talking about. And, you know, I've done a lot of talks about, you know, looking in at block science, Michael Zargam, the Common Stack, the Protocol Labs, how this links to Ocean Protocol, machine learning, how it links to Curve Labs and impact finance, how it feeds into gaming and civic gaming and militarized gaming, which again, that's something that Derek Bros was, you know, pitching, you know, these crypto games for kids in the global South. It matters that we understand what this tokenized commons is. And that's what Bobby is aligned with. Whether he understands it or not, I don't know that he's actually, you know, clued in enough to know what he's actually fronting. But at least whoever's writing his tweets, they know exactly. And so this is an article that I wrote in September of 2018 about, it's called Don't Let Impact Investors Capture the Nonprofit Activist Media. This was an event that I attended at Temple University at the invitation of Sherry Honkala, who's a housing rights activist. And in there, they were essentially trying to get all of the nonprofits on board with impact finance to turn the entire media landscape into an impact finance playground. And then what I realized after attending this event was that they had a partner event. Some of the people who were hosting it included the Annenberg School of Communications at Penn. And the guy who was promoting that, he was with this Media Inequality and Change Center. And he was also, at the same time that he was pitching, like, capturing the nonprofit media, he was planning a corporate media summit. And I think it actually got canceled, but it was called the Media Future Summit for November 8th, 2018. And it's described as an exclusive one-day gathering convened by Bob Garfield, a fellow in the Wharton Future of Advertising program. And you could only come by non-transferable invitation. And it was a one-day event that cost $3,000. And it talked about attendees get access to C-suite decision makers that are shaping the future of corporate media. Not for and it's not just for the day, but essentially you're buying into their club. Right. Among the things that they're talking about is new business solutions amid digital age reordering of the media economy. And then they're talking about this year we will be agonizing less over the current troubles and looking extensively towards the near future. A world perhaps of blockchain, cryptocurrency micropayments, a government broken up duopoly, an attention economy, and so on. And then you would have access, right, to these high-ranking experts in blockchain cryptocurrency micropayments, which is Rockfin, you know, among others, right? It is the attention economy on tokens. And so, you know, it's ridiculous for them to sort of say that somehow my position, my very firm and clear position against distributed ledger technology and extended reality and human speculative markets and predictive profiling has anything to do with Whitney Webb or Vanessa Beeley or Ryan Christensen. I mean, it wasn't about any of them. Like, I had my beef with Derek specifically about him pitching things like digital child labor, but that wasn't him as a person. It was his policy. It was this position he took because it matters, because it's actually really scary. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this. This is my site visit to Bell Labs, and some of you guys might have heard about it. But this is the day, this was right before I can't remember what it was called. I don't know. I see, Leo, you're on there. But it was like, you know, essentially where they swapped over from proof of work to proof of stake, like the Ethereum merge. And so I was running around central New Jersey to all the different Bell Labs sites. And this one was actually in, Morrisville, New Jersey, I think. And it was where Scott Stornetta created this first timestamp document. And Stornetta, Jason and Lynn and Drew and I, like, we saw him in person at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference. And he was, he and Stuart Haber, I think, were talking about, like, claiming this idea of being the first people to talk about distributed ledger technologies. And it was a time stamping document. And so, before I play this, I'm going to just pull this short clip. This is this guy, a short presentation. I think he is in Montreal, but the person he's talking to is at Cesium, which is here in Philadelphia, and they're building the open metaverse, right? So this blockchain attention economy isn't just about watching a podcast. It's about an immersive reality experience based on the tokens that you have in your wallet. It's based on gamified experiences. It's based on teaming. It's based on group minds. It's based on all of these things that connect to, like, Melanie Swan and her non-surgical neural interfaces and nanobots and holographic reality. And they're talking about, in this clip, about a future where and this is with, they're mentioning the guy from NVIDIA, where they're going to create something that you can use all of the data aggregated as tokens from the past to make predictions about the future, these Markov options, and then steer towards a desired outcome. And you could practically, like, create a time machine. And so, I've played this before, but I want to connect it to, again, this dismissal by Webb and the Slow News Day people that we're not going to talk about it, that somehow I just have a purity test and what I have to say doesn't matter, that it's just about me being mean to them and trying to keep them from getting their, like, crypto payments in their wallet, when really what I'm saying is, like, hey, if you have young kids, the world that we're leaving them is this, where literally you're running in a digital time machine run by the military industrial complex that she seems so focused on, and it is all going to run on tokens and digital wallets. So I'll play this one. I'll play this first. Oh darn! Oh no, that I got the wrong one. Wait a minute. Let me see. Okay.
And then we finished the morning with Rev Lebaradian from NVIDIA, your colleague, Neil. And Rev is the guy who's, he's taking everything that the other guy said and he's doing it. Omniverse is actually has USD at its core.
Universal Scene Descriptor, USD.
And, so Rev made a lot of interesting representation about Omniverse. Neil, you want to talk to that?
And they're building the open metaverse. So all of this is open, but it's not going to be really open. It's going to be like a subscription model payment system based on what tokens that you have, right? And it's going to be like a game. And so some of these tokens are going to be rare items. Like some of them you're going to have to level up to for good behavior. And the tokens are going to be used to steer people, steer groups, steer consciousness, right? Towards, I keep talking a bit about this ant computer, the biohybrid computing system. So this is what the tokens are for. The tokens are the equivalent of a biochemical signaling mechanism. And we as agents in the game are using our decision theory, but it's the decisions that we have are going to be determined by the menu of options in the game. And this is something, I don't know what Joseph Gonzalez is talking about these days, Bantam Joe, but I know that he knows this. Like he knows this stuff, that this is how it's going to happen. And it's going to be directly linked to the wallet infrastructure and the protocol layer and the sensor networks. Again, Leo has his more recent article about the natural capital, but all of the sensor networks connected to satellites and drones and other things are going to be linked to people as well.
Yeah, this is a great example of USD already being deployed in real time and use cases and applications, not just being used for offline movie rendering. And there's lots of cool technology in Omniverse. There were a couple of examples that Rev was using, digital, because he was focused on using on use case for metaverse in industrial rather than consumer and gaming. So it was an interesting, different perspective. Digital twins was one of the use cases. Now, what happens? What can you do if you connect the real and virtual worlds? And all kinds of insights can happen, not just in real time, but if you have enough processing power to start simulating the real world as to what might happen, and if you can do that quickly enough, fast enough, you can begin to predict the future. So
yeah, so you can predict the future. You can meld the real world and the virtual world, and you can use the data analytics, and you can start to shape the future, right? And that could be happening through quantum computing, AI systems, and this is all militarized technology tied to really, really high-level, sophisticated behavioral psychology. To the point, and I've talked about this before, but this idea of like the readiness potential, there's this tiny fraction of a second before you even realize you're thinking about doing something, where it's in your mind, just a fraction of a second. And then what happens if they can get to these BCI, brain-computer interfaces, non-surgical, and interfere with that space, right? Actually take away human agency. But it all depends on the tokens. It all depends on the tokenomics. So for me, again, when I first had this run-in with Bros and Bush and these other people, it was about knowing that the predictive analytics were going to be used to make speculative markets on human capital and natural capital. But at this point, it's potentially actually steering and shaping futures in ways that are so subtle that we might not even realize that that we have no agency in our own lives. Like, and we might be fine with that. Like, they might be able to engineer it so that we live in this thing and are, if not satisfied, but it's like Soma. It's like a video game Soma.
A very interesting framing of the power of high performance simulation, trying out different future scenarios. Very powerful, interesting idea.
You actually called it out as superpowers, right? If I remember well.
Superpowers, right? Yes.
And that's the superpower narrative again. And remember, Juan Benet was talking about that. Protocol Labs are going to give you the superpowers, and that's my concern somehow about like the radioisotopes that are connected to next gen nuclear. That they're going to somehow, the track and trace aspect of that are going to be related to steering us and giving us these quote unquote superpowers of predicting the future and shaping the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Rev's a very passionate and inspiring speaker, and I liked that he showed just the scale of the metaverse, which became a theme that we started to see later in the course. And then also looking at all these use cases outside of entertainment and marketing.
So the use cases outside of entertainment, like that's life, right? Like that we're living in extended reality governed by tokens and protocol layer. It's our whole life. Like our whole life is going to be, and then what is truth, right? And so my question, as we talk about, like where there are some influencers that want to center the deep state or state intelligence or surveillance on censorship and to keep your attention in that corner, to look over there, right? Who the guy who wrote the lovely poem, look over there, right? Don't look here. Like, don't think about what we're building is a video game world that's run by DARPA, right? Or that's run by the global hedge funds. Don't look over there. Let's just keep you really busy fighting for your right to be on Facebook uncensored. But meanwhile, Kennedy and Webb essentially are saying that they've agreed that the new economic model is based in a digital reality that is tokenized, right? I mean, they pretty much said that. Like, so maybe they've already decided that that's the future that they're embracing. But if so, it's happened without any sort of robust public discussion of what that means for future generations and how it could go terribly wrong. Like, that conversation simply has not been sufficiently unpacked in public, online, anywhere, as far as I can tell.
Mark and I are excited because we're going to have Rev on the podcast this season as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward to talk to Rev. I think he made the case, about real-time simulation, and when you can have a digital twin and simulate the future and having recorded the past, it's like you have teleportation, time travel, and then you can explore alternate futures. So I think it's...
So time travel, teleportation and time travel. And then later on, I'll have this clip from Ote, which is talking about holographic reality and living life in a holographic simulation. And so these are really important concepts. I'm gonna stop on that one, and then I'm gonna I'll play this one from the O. This is something that Sean sent to me, Ote, and it's a bit old. It's 4 years old, but they're talking about the rendering, and I don't know if Jason's on here, but Jason knows all about rendering. Evidently, rendering things takes a long time. But if you're going to live in virtual reality where the world is being turned into CGI before your eyes as you're walking around. Finding efficient ways of doing all of the computing processing is really important. And the systems that they're developing are actually going to run on tokens and distributed ledger technology so that they can source the rendering computations in the cheapest way possible. And then that's all going to be done on blockchain as well. So this is us living in the extended reality. This is just a couple minutes.
And I figured that I would start off by describing our vision for the future and where we see things going. I've been doing these kinds of presentations for a while. I think when I started talking about the 2020s, it was 5 years back, and now we're about a year and a half away. But the future for media, whether it's in mixed reality or whether it's traditional linear content you see on TV, is evolving rapidly. And so I think as we get into the next decade, you're going to see these kinds of trends emerge where photorealism, in other words, making CG content look perfectly real, is going to become not only cheap and fast, but built in, a commodity, something that every single game, if it needs to, will look as real as the best Hollywood visual effects that you can put into a film. Furthermore, even linear content like films are going to be built in game engines. They'll be in real time. You're seeing those trends emerge where we have...
So you're going to be living in a game engine. I mean, that's essentially what's happening, that you're going to be living in a game engine. They're going to be keeping track of you as agents in the game, with the satellites, right, with your device, eventually with just whatever, insertable, wearable thing that you've got that's tracking you to keep track of like the game engine, where you are in the game. And then you are an agent. And then all of this, the decisions that you're making in the game are being added into the AI machine learning.
Big filmmakers like Neil Blomkamp that are doing entire shorts all in the Unity engine. And furthermore, the tools that we use to experience, create, and work with content and media are going to be intuitive. We don't really imagine that there's going to be a system with siloed apps or even the web as we know it. We think there's going to be a lot of spatial, interchangeable content and services that will link together.
And I just want to point out here, so when I was doing my ed tech research around UNICEF and Singularity University, one of the virtual reality programs that they were, again, that piloting a lot of the stuff in Africa and India, and one of the ones in Africa, initially the plan was gestural coding. Now, that didn't happen and they turned it into something else. But think about what that means, gestural coding. So these were kids that they said, oh, these kids in Africa are never going to get a teacher or a school. Like, we're just going to boot them into the next level, which is virtual reality. And so it's essentially post-literate. And I want to just ask you guys to think a minute about like memetics and this idea of language that is post, it's like the whole Babylon thing, or like addressing like that we're going to get to a point that imagery and visuals are the way you communicate. Right. And we won't have any like nation language, cultural languages that will like communicate in visuals or digital sensory experiences like bugs, right? Like through scent or through like virtual scent or virtual imagery. And so in that, like they would have these African kids code the metaverse, right? Through gesture, through dance. And then that links to that, I know I keep talking about these Adrian Tchaikovsky books, but the octopi, like I put another audio clip up, but they communicated through changes in texture of their skin and color and dance. And then they felt very much that the humans were limited because we just had this stupid voice and I guess like my hands. But the human capacity for sophisticated communication was so much more limited than what the octopus had. And so I feel like this is what we're moving into is some other, and that is more noetics. That is more like we're living in the egregore. That is what that thing, where it's going, right? But again, I just want to emphasize that our access to that and our participation in that is going to be all linked onto the tokens and these soul-bound tokens.
And that truly is how we see the metaverse emerging. The tools that are used to create that content will be things like Tilt Brush or Oculus Medium, things that are actually inside of VR and XR that allow you to spatially experience the content that you want others to share. And
spatially experience the content you want to share, right? Now, I will also emphasize, and this is something like, I was working on the whole Scientology thing today, and the time frame in California, like the reason that Children's Health Defense, I think that the California chapter was so robust was that as of 2015, there was measles outbreak in Disneyland in California. And then that's what led to the legislation revoking religious exemptions around injections in the state of California for school children. And so there was a lot of organizing that happened early on around that. And it involved in some capacity people who were connected to Scientology. But all of this augmented immersive reality is literally coming out of CGI, and not just NVIDIA, but Disney and the gaming engines, right? The Pixar, and Jason and I have talked about that in the past, Catmull, and University of Utah and the Utah Teapot. So all of this convergence is a long time coming. This idea of later on, there's some guy who's really big into Scientology who's funding ABC Mouse, which is like pre-K online games, and then he went into Neopets, which are these online digital games tied to virtual pets that you have, and it has gambling, and it has virtual economies, and it has these other things. And he was about immersive advertising, right? So this immersion is like it's also embedded advertising and tokenomics and gaming, and they've been grooming people for this for a really long time. And one of the key people, one of the longest time board members at Children's Health Defense, Tarina Eisner, is the daughter-in-law of Michael Eisner, the longtime head of Disney. And at the time, I think he left Disney in 2005, so it was a decade before this measles situation. But he was involved in all of the theme parks, and I know Jason has spent a lot of time looking at Disney and these different the use of behavioral group management in Disney with ticketing and digital payments and line management and different sort of built environment specifications for managing people in those environments. It's quite the test bed, and Raul has talked about that as well. I think too there were some connections to Israeli tech. So I just want to emphasize in this idea of us living in immersive reality, Disney and Pixar are central to that, and then again with the tokens.
And as we get towards 10 years out, that's really where the work that we're doing now is focused on, as far as building these foundational pieces. Because in about 10 years, I think that holographic displays, in other words, displays that are so dense, they have trillions of megapixels, that can actually beam out images and visuals that are equivalent to what you have in the Star Trek holodeck. They'll include things like touch through haptics. They'll also be everywhere. They'll be cheap. The one thing that we've seen is that televisions, displays, screens all become much more inexpensive over time, and the more of them that there are, the cheaper they become. So holographic surfaces that can capture and display holographic content can be on clothing, they can be on walls, windows, and that's a game changer. But the road there is actually very precarious. There's a lot of compute power needed to power these devices, and we're trying really hard at Otoy to come up with ways where we can come up with network effects, codec streaming tools, all these things that enable this future to happen.
Yeah, and the distributed ledger technology is central to that, and he goes on to talk about that later on. But the blockchain systems are what are going to run extended reality. Again, but it's always a subscription, and so I'm going to just run. This one is I've played this before, but this is at oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think it's a blockchain conference at UT Austin, and they're talking about extended reality. And this guy is he's a professor at UT Austin in I want to say, I don't know if it's astrophysics, but it's space-based engineering. And next to him is a guy from Facebook and another guy who is from General Motors extended reality automation. And even the people from the other two, they're dude, don't be so excited about extended reality. It's not all that. But he's imagining the world where you would see it out of Disney glasses. And again, what you get to see out of your eyeballs is going to be tokenized and conditional and based on a subscription model. So this is just 1 minute. But it's the guy on the left who's super excited about this tokenized reality and having Disney princess eyes.
I think there's a lot of human connection that happens between people when they can see each other's eyes. And to take that away actually would be a pretty detrimental experience.
Maybe so, but I could represent with great big Disney princess eyes on the outside of the headset what my eyes are actually doing. And on the other side, I'm seeing video pass through with very low latency and perhaps some enhancements. I mean, I might not want to go back to these primitive transparent glasses.
All right, I'll throw one more at you, and that is the effects of light on our circadian rhythms and the damage that might do long term to only be looking at displays. Instead, I mean, maybe with super high quality displays, OLED, that sort of technology, you might be able to do that. But there's a lot of research now for that.
But think what you do with the homeless problem. You can just make it disappear. And if we're on, on a dystopian planet with 130-degree baked clay, it can look like a paradisiacal garden all the time. This is a way to check out from reality without having to deal with it.
I think there's a lot.
So essentially he's talking about making homeless people disappear. And, again, that's probably like in this protocol layer, like an upgrade, right? Oh, if you can move to the elite platinum level, right? If you've leveled up, if you have enough payments, then you can just erase things out of your reality that are uncomfortable. And these are the things I'd like to talk about, right? Like I'd like to get away from all of the framing that they're giving you about the World Economic Forum, about transhumanism, about central bank digital currency. And not to say that you can never talk about them again, but like we've talked about that a lot. Like I think it's time to talk about some of the other parts of what this is, because the people who are endorsing, the Bitcoin structures, the distributed ledger technology for the anti-censorship, that is going to be driving all of this forward. And let's see, I just have a few more of these clips. So this is a day last fall where a friend joined me and we walked around Philadelphia to all these different historic places, like telling the story. And this is towards the end of the day. And it's a discussion about the Dream Garden, which is a mosaic tile installation in the Curtis Publishing Building. And again, it's quite interesting when you think about publishing, because again, we're talking about influencer culture and digital media and how we live in immersive reality. And so this, in the past, immersive media would simply be a glossy ladies magazine, right? That's what the Curtis Publishing Company was about. And this Dream Garden was all Tiffany glass, and it's quite spectacular. And there was a big fight over, they wanted to remove it and sell it into private hands, and it was able to stay in the city. But one of the things I talk about is this idea of a subscription model. A while back, someone said, like with these certain Pantone colors, if you didn't keep your subscription up to date, the color would go black. Right? And so imagine being in the Dream Garden, but having living in black and white versus color. Like it literally goes to the Wizard of Oz model. And is that what, like when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says, like, well, we're not doing crony capitalism, we're doing some other kind of capitalism, but is it going to be subscription model token capitalism? Because if you're showing up at the Bitcoin conference and you're talking about an ecology of digital currency, that is pretty much what you're advocating, right? Like you may not realize that's what you're advocating, but that's where it goes. So I'll just touch a little bit on the Dream Garden, and then I went to Cesium. So the guy in the last clip where they had the video games behind him, I don't know, that might have been in his house, but technically their office is in downtown Philly. And this is why I really want to pay attention to all these, where I keep saying, like, look where you are in the labyrinth, because if you look where you are, I mean, a lot of times you'll find unexpected things that are really important.
System of domination is coming, and it's all framed as, feel good, liberty, democracy. All right, so here we are behind the American Philosophical Society. So the second bank is here, for context. Right?
And that's where the first central bank.
Right next to us. And then on this side, in that block is Independence Hall. And over there is the Liberty Bell. So that's where we're situated. And this is a statue of the signer. And, I would just sort of put this idea, like, look at the heroic, like the pen and the paper and the contract, right? The social contract. And understand if maybe that social contract was actually made by Freemasons for some reason that we don't quite appreciate, right? And like, we're living under a code. And so the stories we've all been told is that this is the good story. Like, this is the good story, and then we go to other countries and we bring this story to other countries by brute force, often to profit defense contracting interests and other financial interests and creative destruction through war. And then we bring the democracy, and then this new version of democracy is going to be augmented with tokens. And
yeah, and I just want to, I know Jason's sort of in the chat too, and Jason's been doing some really nice pieces lately about like Ukraine and the digital transformation of Ukraine and how like that's being driven largely by Western interests, right? Destruction, start over, get rid of the legacy, but we're all doing it in the name of innovation and democracy usually, right? Like we use the war to clear the slate.
Here, we're going to tell you that you're radically participating by giving you a pile of tokens to vote on things you don't know about, and then to ask you to give those tokens to the AI so the AI can be your representative. And
I can't do that.
We're in the middle of election season right now, and if you listen to me, you realize that I'm kind of post any sort of political ideology. The whole system is not what we were told, in my opinion.
And so this, again, I don't know what the answer is, but there's a lot of money in children's health defense that's going into litigation. And if we know that the system is meant to be proceeding, like we've ended up here not by mistake, but by design, right? And so if we continue to play within the game, which is the game of the legal system that's now going to be coming with embedded smart contracts, like it's a problem. So I'm just going to scoop ahead a little bit. This is the part of the mosaic.
It's quite incredible. And, if you just think for a moment about what I was saying about the subscription color service for colors, and then if you don't pay the subscription, then certain colors get turned into black. And, to me, some of what Cliff and I were talking about last night, about what are you listening to, what story are you in? Do you recognize that you have agency over the stories that you're listening to and the story that you tell yourself and others around you? I think that this idea of the dream garden, it's really interesting to me because it feels like, they want to invite you into a story of bliss, and that is the metaverse. They want to craft a beautiful place that's so much nicer than the real world. We were walking over across Independence Hall, which is all, gated off with security guards. And, as we did, there were clearly several groups of unhoused people who were folding up their blankets and picking up their bags for the day to make their way to try to find some shelter for the night. And they want to make the real world really, really terrible so that they can, invite you into the dream. And the dream is, as I mentioned, I feel like it's sort of the Satan's proposal. And for people who don't know better, it might be attractive, right? It might be attractive, but I feel like maybe this laughing figure, in the mountain, like the last laugh is on us, because at some point, our UBI runs out and we don't have, the highlights on the sides of that mountain, those shades of colors are custom, they just go to black or gray.
Yeah. So, and then this is just me at the cesium, I think. Let me see. Oh, there's WeWork. Okay, let me see.
What are we listening to? Okay, on to cesium. Cesium that is building the simulacra. Cesium that is knitting together extended reality. Okay, it's starting to get dark. We walked about 5 blocks from the Curtis Publishing Building with the Dream Garden, and now we're on 11th Street. And on the 3rd floor of this building, so I guess in that area, is the office of cesium. And cesium, I guess, is an element. It's used in the atomic clocks. And this company is actually a central company in developing the systems for the open metaverse. So I'm going to take a minute and just sort of do a little bit more deconstruction on that. But since I'm in the middle of a busy street corner, I'm going to tuck in next door. There's a little courtyard with some seating, and we'll tell you a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So, and there's WeWork, so it's perfect that it's right off of there. And I won't go a ton longer. I just have a couple things. This is Rev that they were talking about, the NVIDIA guy, and I've played this before, but I'm gonna. This is only like 2 minutes. He's talking about children, and like when I get a little bit emotional about some of this stuff, essentially, like he's talking about consuming the real world to create the AI simulation, and then to give children essentially a prosthetic, an assistant to build their imaginary worlds out, but within the AI. And to me, this is this parasitic thing when people are like, well, what is it? And I'm like, we are a tool. We are a tool that is being used for our creativity and our soul and our imagination. And they want to ingest the real to create the virtual. And when I put this up, I don't know, like 6 months ago, we didn't really have the ChatGPT thing, but now I can see how really unsettling it's going to be.
The thing that made the internet and the web in specific so successful was that it was created by everyone. Anyone can go create HTML. Anyone can go create a web page. Anyone can go upload a video and become a YouTube star and create a podcast these days. It's not limited to just a small number of people. But that's unfortunately not true for 3D. Creating 3D virtual worlds is just extremely hard, and it takes decades to master just very niche aspects of the craft as a whole. And so we need AI to democratize the creation of virtual worlds.
We need AI to democratize the creation of virtual worlds because that's where we're going to live, and it's going to run on tokens and digital wallets.
AI is going to help us ingest the real world and turn it into virtual worlds, so we can
So ingest the real world.
Have digital twins of the real things. And then we're going to be able to use those things we collect from the real world to remix them and recompose new ones.
Now, it'll be interesting to see how all this works because I think they're framing on the one hand, they want the interoperability but the things that are being remixed are going to be private property. And so there's going to be micropayments for the remixing, right? And a lot of what's happening now with ChatGPT and this idea of, the artists getting ripped off of the data, that all of that is going to be fed into the system so that the artist can get tiny micropayments every time someone remixes or uses their data. That's what Ocean Protocol is about, to create something new in this remixing. But it'll just be bazillions of tiny micropayments, like little tiny scraps. What was that movie, The Office, where they're always about the penny, when you round the penny and all of a sudden times so many things, it's like millions upon millions of dollars. It's that. But we haven't agreed to that. And so the problem, reaction, solution is that you take all this stuff from the artists and then you make them outraged. And instead of saying well, do we even want to live in extended reality? They come and say, oh, don't worry, we'll compensate you appropriately. All you need is a digital identity and a digital unique identifier, and we'll send the micropayments your way when your stuff gets incorporated into the Borg.
And AI assistants will help us generate new things and create new designs in there.
And that's the ChatGPT. I didn't know that when I first posted that, again, 6 months ago. But these assistants, that's the ChatGPT stuff.
Because, every human, every child has a virtual world or numbers of them trapped in their minds. When you talk to a 6-year-old, they'll tell you all about these virtual worlds, and they communicate them to you with words, incepting your mind with their vision. We want every child to be able to actually turn that into a real virtual world in the metaverse.
That's theft. They want to steal the stuff from the kids. It's just so sad.
The key to that is it has to be AI. There's no other way we're going to be able to do that. You need an AI to understand what that child is saying and convert it into the triangles and texels and rigs and all the other things that are so hard to create right now.
So this is the guy when they're talking about getting all of the past data and exploring alternative futures. This is the guy they're talking about from NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is based on envy. And if you look at their logo, it's actually this green eye, the green eye of envy. And I think this is the green eye of envy of the thing that can't be alive, that can't have a soul, but is trying to sort of, again, steer us and parasitize us into the thing. And I think like I'm getting close to the end. Let me see if I can maybe, like, this is the part about Bell Labs. And, you know, essentially I was talking about Scott Stornetta and this idea of like the filing cabinet and accessing different things with the tokens. And I wish I had, like, I didn't really have time to make the clip, but I'm going to see if I can. Sorry. There's the Utah Teapot. There's the game. Let me play a little bit of this.
Actually driving under Adobe, like it's the gateway. And so I think that the file compression and the graphics combined with the fact that, you know, the first virtual item was at University of Utah was this teapot, like all of the world is going to be digitized and thrown into the metaverse. And then it's accessible only on tokenized access, permissioned access, just like a video game, that you can't level up into new parts of the game unless you have the proper credentials, you have the proper certs, you can show that you've achieved some skill level, or you have like access. And it's not unlike the military, right? Like you have security levels and access levels, and certain people can only access certain things. And so the whole world is going to start to be that. Like, do you want to unlock this digital experience? Well, then you have to have the right token. And if you don't have it, then you have to figure out how to get it, and then go get it. And maybe that costs like some sort of other token to get that money, or maybe it costs time or conformative behavior. Like, that's what's coming with this time stamping. And I think that when this document, which was called How to Timestamp a Digital Document, in the Journal of Cryptology from 1991, the International Association of Cryptologic Research, the documents aren't just going to be like a PDF like we imagine today with Adobe, like we're sending people a PDF like our fax or whatever, and it has a stamp. No, this is going to be a whole experience, a virtual reality experience, maybe a memory, maybe a different experiential opportunity. Like, there's going to be a lot of other stuff going on with digital documents, digital information, because really the whole world is going to be made digital, and it's going to be fractured across all of these different endpoints. And I think that's this multiverse concept. You know, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name, and I apologize that I don't have it right off, but he was in Princeton. He was either at the university or at the Institute for Advanced Study. And like, he was a physicist, and what he was talking about was like the Schrodinger's cat experiment, but that like the cat is in the box and it's both alive or dead because of the gas. And you don't know till you open up the door if it's alive or dead. But once you touch the door, you're engaged by sort of quantum entanglement in the thing. So there are two universes that split off, one in which the cat is dead, and one is which the cat is not dead, or one is which you open the door and you didn't open the door. So there are these tremendous branching future possibilities. And that's what that movie was that I saw this week, was the Everything Everywhere All at Once, was what happens when the universe fractures across different pathways, and how do you access alternate pathways? In this case, the woman.
All right, so essentially what I'm saying is these tokens are probably part of this multiverse. And even if they can't really make a multiverse, even if Hugh Everett's many worlds theory doesn't apply in real life, I think that in the metaverse, they can create a multiverse. Like, they're saying it's an omniverse, right? But the pathways and the decision trees are going to be based on the conditional tokens. So, okay, so this will just be my last one. And thanks for listening to like some of these older clips. I you know, to me, I just, you know, I'll thank Whitney for giving me the opportunity just to sort of revisit this conversation. Because again, if where we are at is that we're talking about deplatforming, we're talking about censorship, we're talking about financial privacy, but we're not talking about tokens or zero knowledge proofs or digital twinning or Markov principles or alternative futures or many worlds. Like, we should ask ourselves why, right? Not that the things she's talking about aren't relevant to some extent, but there's a certain amount of bandwidth that we have access to, and we should be questioning blockchain media platforms, not simply as, you know, in this video of saying like, how dare I say naughty, that you're not allowed to have your, you know, you're deplatformed and you have to have a new economic model. I get that. Like, we're all in the machine. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we shouldn't still question the machine, right? If you're put in dire circumstances that you're accepting or making a certain choice, they're counting on us having made the choice that we'll stop looking, that we'll stop questioning, and we'll simply accept what comes next. And I think that's where things have gotten off track with a lot of the digital media influencers. So based on this whole Rockfin conversation, when Jason and I and Lynn, we did a info picket at the Texas Blockchain Summit the fall before last, fall of 2021. And so we did a lot of site visits around Austin. It was hot, and Jason was a good egg, and he was carrying around this heavy camera. And I think we'd actually had a couple days worth, and this is on the second day. And we went to the address of that's supposedly the Rockfin studios. And it seems like it's sort of a co-working space that has these weird freight containers. So this is, I think, about let me see. It's 15 minutes. And so I'm just going to roll this. And I'm sorry that I can't make the screen bigger. I didn't figure out how to do the full screen stuff. So just be patient with me that it's a smaller screen. But this is Jason and I at the Rockfin studio. And at the time, I was trying to explain to people what was really happening, like why we needed to care about tokenized attention economy, about blockchain media, and this predated the stuff about NVIDIA and the multiverse and the omniverse and, exploring alternative futures. I didn't even have that, but I knew based on that, again, that 2018, this article I wrote in 2018 about the nonprofit media and the Annenberg School of Tokenization, and that they were planning the blockchain cryptocurrency micropayments, and that we did know that the haptics were coming, and that I mentioned that, hey, some of these experiences, these digital experiences, it's not just going to be brainy investigative reporting; it's going to be camming, right? And some of that sex work, right? If what you're saying is that youth in the global South can do digital work to earn money for their families, well, what's to say? Oh, it stops at a crypto card game, and it's not camming, it's not soft porn, right? With haptic robotic suits and things like that, and that now people don't go to Southeast Asia, they just tune into their favorite camming channel or something like that, and where are the protections and all of that again are going to be running on these protocol layers. So anyway, so this will be the last thing. It's 15 minutes, so just bear with me. I might stop here and there in the middle, but at Rockfin in Austin. All right, so we are here towards the end of the day. Of course, in the grander scheme of information warfare and the gamified metaverse, our social relations are also being enclosed and integrated into the cap system of global capital. And in this larger conversation around the metaverse and information warfare and navigating what's coming, beyond the video gamification element, there's also the media element. And as Michael Crow in Arizona State University says, in their Center for the Future of War, the future is weaponized narrative. And I think we all know that we've been navigating that in very intense ways over the past 18 months. And oftentimes our identity becomes wrapped up in the media that we consume. And increasingly, the media that we're consuming online is integrated into sort of vertical chains of capital that seek to divide and isolate us from one another and channel us into certain stories. And I would say my lived experience over the past couple months, especially seeing where the Substack things are going, is that, siloing, channeling, and pitting people against one another is really central. So a lot of people have asked me, clearly I'm here and I'm here to tell a story. I'm not here to tell you that you should necessarily follow my story, but I'm offering one model of how I see the world in all of the upheaval and standing for natural life and against AI and this militarized metaverse. That's sort of the story I'm saying, and that if we could all awaken to that as what is actually happening, that we could see the threat and then from a principled place, a moral place, try to begin to rectify it and heal the past harms. And I just want to say the militarization is really important, and I owe Lynn, there's talk that we did that I'm still editing, and I got distracted by all of this children's health defense nonsense. But I have another section on this open education resources that unfortunately the Texas legislature, both the representatives and the Senate, it passed on both sides. So they're moving forward on OER. Eventually that's going to be extended reality headset delivery, not just tablets and devices. But she did her darndest to stop that, but still it was proceeding forward. And the thing that we realized when we were in Austin was that, and that's something that Raul had mentioned to me, is that it's really, and he had done a lot of research as well, it's this liberal veneer of music on top of a really deep history of militarization, and militarization tied to high-tech computing through the university, through BAE, through these different defense contracting industries. And then in Austin, they actually had just set up a new defense innovation office to work with small businesses on the future of warfare. And a lot of these small businesses are gaming companies, right? Web3 and gaming companies that they're bringing in. So Austin has this sort of, there's this dichotomy. On the one hand, there's this sort of pseudo-progressive narrative of, music and culture and liberalism. But on the back end, it's really built off on this this partnership of academia and military technology that's going to be woven into everything that is really the underlayer of the extended reality experience.
Sort of the narrative that I'm in. And over the course of the last 18 months, I started out in education and working around issues of poverty management, and then it grew, and the attention on my work has grown. I'm clearly not sort of any kind of big fish at this point. I'm still a very tiny fish in this, but I know that people, appreciate what I offer, those of who do and those who don't. But I'm not doing this for money, and I'm very fortunate in that my economic well-being at the present time isn't integrated into how many of you choose to step into the story that I'm offering. I'm simply offering it more for me as a journey. It feels like for me a journey of trying to find the truth of what is happening, try to look at the past history and blend them together and offer them up to people and give people tools of looking at the world that might help them make sense of what's happening. But I'm not really doing it for financial gain. Not that I'm against people who are, but we do have to recognize that the stories being offered when financial gain is involved, the AI systems, the data analytics systems, all of these systems are meant to keep our attention in this weaponized narrative moment, and to keep us focused and to keep us in feedback loops that are keep our eyes on devices and screens and not actually out in the real world. And that those content creators, those influencers who are very effective at that, at keeping the attention focused in a narrow story, are the ones that are financially rewarded.
And I think this is an important point. And again, I want to say, saying it outside of the place of judgment, it simply is a fact that the attention economy requires us to be engaged and then to feel like we're an active participant. And so, how much can you ramp that up, right? How much can, there is a finite amount of time that we are awake during the day. How much can that eat up? And then in that space, how much, I find that it is sort of an outrage engine largely, and like competitive outrage, right? And it's not good for anybody. I think we have to understand that isn't healthy. This economic model isn't healthy. And so rather than just limiting the conversation to financial privacy or censorship or deplatforming, is can we have a conversation about what engaging in these digital media spaces, even before we have the full-on tokenization, what that means for us and our own, our future and in our heart space, right? Because I think for the most part, while some of us feel like we have built community in these spaces, increasingly those communities that got built up during the first year or two of the lockdowns really got torn apart, honestly. And I think that's by design, that creative destruction is built into these platforms, and that needs to be taken into account.
So, that has been the space of influencers in a lot of online platforms, many of which were not we're monetized in a variety of ways. And as the pandemic wore on and the control over the narratives by those at the top began to be more and more repressive, many people were removed from those platforms or chose to leave those platforms, and then were looking for more secure places to tell the stories that they wanted to tell and to earn their livings. In that mix. And so one of the places that was well positioned to catch a lot of people who were transitioning off of those platforms and to bring in new creators is Rockfin. And Rockfin sort of bills itself as sort of one of these largest subscription-based blockchain models for content creation. And it's based here in Austin, and it's a relatively new company, just a couple years old. And so that's where we're here right now, and it's in a co-working space. So you'll remember yesterday we were at the WeWork co-working space on Congress Street or Congress Avenue in downtown Austin, and that's where Social Finance and the General Assembly were there, and many other organizations use that as their address. And this is a much smaller entity, and it's outside of a downtown setting. It's off one of these many highways in Austin, but it's sort of like you can see behind me, the future of work is in these sort of gussied up freight containers that are sort of set up as mod pods, I guess, to do your work in, and it seems like a very small scale, especially when we compare it to like the Samsung office complex, this behemoth entity that we were just visiting before. So I'm here to talk just a little bit about the attention economy, which is coming online, and the idea of data analytics tied to blockchain, because what is really most valuable about metadata that accrues in an interoperable format, which is what blockchain offers, is the use of that potentially for machine learning and pattern recognition.
And that's really important. This idea of you as a subscriber, like your metadata of how you interact with these various digital platforms, whether they're Substacks or whether they're the Rockfin, the different channels, or the different brands. All of that is tracked very carefully. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. There's some information about the Rockfin and the data analytics. But I think a lot of us sort of imagine that because we follow our favorite influencers into these spaces, that somehow that this thing is outside of the data analytics economy, but it isn't. It isn't. And that all of that data is used to build your twin.
And then even within Rockfin, there's quite a bit of data that they're gathering on those people who are subscribing, so that they can build their business model, because they're in the business of eyeballs on screens and growing their base and growing their stable of content creators. And so they want to know who's subscribing, how do they interact with the content, what are those patterns, and how do we offer them more of what they want, which again keeps them online more and more and more.
And I'll just say too, the last live that I did about the Children's Health Defense job descriptions, like one of those, let me see, where's my little cursor? Let me see the Camelot. Let me see, job. Yeah, let me just show you the job postings here. One sec. Yeah, this SEO coordinator. So I just want to sort of mention that. I'll move this a little bit. Okay. So this is the SEO coordinator. Here it is. It takes a minute to load. So, it's interesting. So here, Children's Health Defense is called a litigation advocacy organization. And for this job is a relatively newly listed. The SEO, I didn't know what SEO was, but they're talking about organizing incoming information for the websites, optimizing all of the content, including the keyword strategy to increase the rankings on these various networks, organizing and structuring all of the content, getting it all tagged. Now, this is all of like the back end of the data economy. Creating guidelines to optimize copy and landing pages for the search engines. So essentially, like when we're consuming this digital media, it's all so that they can like score better on the rankings, right? And so essentially we're remaking our reality, which is digital reality, so that like Google will find us better and will show up at the top. Measuring the web traffic, following the trends, and let's see, synthesizing all of this information into actionable information. Let's see, it's a $65,000 to $75,000 a year job. I guess using the analytics to evaluate digital strategies and create reports to increase reach and engagement, because that's what it is about. It's about managing the engagement. So Google Analytics, multitasking, business and decision. Oh, I thought it was in here, but maybe it's not. I thought it was like looking at, maybe it's a different one, like the newswriter, about looking at the various, the patterns of the use on the accounts and getting people to do certain behaviors. But this is all like we watch things, and again, I'm doing this too, so I'm part of the system. I'm acknowledging I'm part of the system. But even having just a cognition and an awareness of what's happening on the back end as we do this engagement.
So I'm just going to take a minute and sort of touch base on a press release by a company called Segment. Segment is a data warehousing system that was hired by Rockfin to sort of help streamline their querying, in which they could do analytics on their customer base to help grow their business and feed that back to the content creators. But again, you can understand within the system, just like any media, it's not really different from existing media, but you advance what sells, you advance what gets people's attention and keeps people's attention. And sometimes the stories that are most important are the stories that people don't need to realize yet that they're the ones that need to be paid attention to. And
I want to just emphasize that again, like, it's a product. This content is a product. The algorithms position things in front of you. But just because something isn't viral, just because something isn't widely known, doesn't mean that it's not significant. And I'm not saying this just because, like, you know, there are accusations that I want to be the voice or I want to be the queen bee of the thing, or I'm fine to create all of this information and create like resources and directories and screenshots and links, and to map it out and to share it more broadly so other people can develop their own analysis and build onto it and expand on it. It's more about, I want the ideas in our awareness, because the ideas that I'm trying to cover about how tokenization and digital wallets and digital twins works in extended reality, I think is vitally important for us to navigate what comes next. And so, you know, if what we're saying is like it's not important because if it were, it would be at the top of the list of things we're talking about, I would say actually the inverse is true. Maybe it's the quiet stuff that we're not hearing a lot about is the stuff that we should actually realize that the look over there way of doing business is, and we fall into line with that. The look over there, look at the thing this week, look at, you know, that's the peripheral processing, that we need to be very intentional about trying to acknowledge when that's happening and then find other sources. And even optimally, I was talking with someone today, I said, you know, part of it is if you can look within yourself. Like for me, the most satisfying research I do is when there's something that is in my own experience that comes onto my own radar, and then I'm following my own trail to develop my understanding of it in the light of all the things I know, and then to have that new information reflect back on my pre-existing information and to deepen it. But that's profoundly personal. And that's something that you can only get by doing your own work. It's not going to work if you're doing just consuming. You know, and I think, you know, Jason's been doing like more talks of his own. And I think you might agree that when you actually are doing it from that place, it feels different than simply listening to someone. And I would encourage more of us to be our own creators, not to necessarily become influencers, but merely to go on the journey and then to be open to sharing our findings, even if they're uncertain or unfinished, with other people, so that we can see, you know, and again, maybe it's the wrong idea to be human on these places, but I think that there is something in doing your own journeying and not just being the content consumer model that's very rewarding and important.
So we get in these feedback loops of we're giving people what they think they want, when really there are important narratives that need to be shared that maybe aren't popular. They're not the popular narratives. They're not something that's going to keep people's attention for a long time, at least initially. And yet, from the point of view of real investigative journalism, those are the things that most need to be said. And the business model, even on blockchain, even if it's secured and private, or not, gets around the issues of being pulled down, it doesn't really remedy the fact that at the end of the day, it is a capitalist construct, and a lot of people consuming media are doing it in a way that is somewhat of a distraction as opposed to a mobilization, which is hard because we're all stuck and trying to navigate and find new social systems in person, which is very difficult. So I'm reading from, essentially it's a press release by Segment that's sort of touting the services they offer to Rockfin to help them manage their data better. And this is both the data of how their subscribers interact with the content. So this is just a quote from their release. Rockfin is hyper-focused on making their content creators successful by giving them the tools they need to drive more subscribers and improve user engagement. So again, that's the growth model. You get more people, and then you hold their attention longer and you retain them. In order to do this, they need easy access to all of their end users' behavioral and contextual data, including data from Chargeify, Snowflake, Amazon S3, Atatas, Pingdom, front-end segment events, and more to power advanced customer analytics. Okay, so by all of us participating in these digital spaces, we're all feeding into the greater data analytics system. So Rockfin's existing data warehouse solution was limiting their ability to innovate and scale, and they needed tools that connect with their warehouse, and their warehouse didn't allow them to marry the behavioral and contextual data to derive advanced customer analytics and power next-level customer dashboards. They needed a flexible, easily accessible, and central repository for all customer data across the business to live. So they decided to rethink their architecture.
So again, this is the model, right? I guess this is the not crony capitalism. This is the decentralized bottom-up version of extended reality. And if they're talking about all of this data and consumer behavior relating to simply listening to podcasts, imagine where it's going to go once we get to the point of having living in immersive media with immersive advertising and interactive television and product placements and behavioral psychology gaming and teaming, right? And stigmergy and steering. It's kind of crazy to think about, right? We're already at this point where it's simply you listening to different kinds of podcasts, and where it's going to go in the next 10 years once it's holographic reality.
Segment made it easy to empower both their content creators and internal business teams with new insights across the holistic customer journey. Rockfin was able to up-level their customer dashboards by marrying the raw behavioral data with payment and subscription data. Internally, the Rockfin's data teams were able to build better product level and business dashboards, and externally they launched powerful customer dashboards to give content creators insights to help them optimize their own processes and acquire more subscribers.
And again, that's it. It's about acquiring more. It's always the more, right? More time online, more subscribers, more money. And if you level out, you're not going to be, that's not the business model. The business model is always to continually to grow. And it's based in mining our own personal lives. And eventually there's going to be a tipping point. There's going to be no more extraction that can happen unless they twin us. And then maybe, I guess if you have a digital twin that can have different subscriptions than you, then maybe they can double their data collection. But until that happens, really they're after as much of you as they can get.
And so I think you get the sense. This is a quote from Casey Kent at Rockfin. These dashboards marry Segment's behavioral data with clickstream data, payment data, subscription data, and show users which clicks led to subscriptions, which is how creators get rewarded. Okay.
And so that's behaviorism. The tokens, it's not really that different than the Skinner box, right? You get rewarded the more clicks, and each of these clicks, are like the tokens.
So really, we're talking about life on these blockchain ledgers, life on leaderboards, and all of this is made possible largely it's going to be made possible by the blockchain technologies. Now, I want to take just a moment to touch on Rockfin's. They have a patent, so that the co-founders are Scott Augustine and Martin Floriani, and they founded the company about 2018 here in Austin, and they patented in August 2020, I think this came out, what was called a mint and burn blockchain-based feedback communication protocol. And so that was their patent, was around blockchain-based feedback communication. The firm Pillsbury, Winthrop, Shaw, Pittman helped them with their patent process. And this particular law firm has a focus in media, energy, finance, and real estate. And they have they're a premium corporate member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and they're pretty connected. I mean, their lobbying clients include Eli Lilly, Northrop Grumman, Abbott Laboratories, Boeing, General Motors. I mean, this is a pretty high power law firm helping on this blockchain patent. And so, as we move towards the attention economy, there's something, and this is unrelated to Rockfin entirely, but the idea of blockchain media and blockchain attention and advertising is that there's like these new browsers like Brave, which is a blockchain browser where you can opt in to get attention, basic attention tokens, and you'll get tokens for using the browser and engaging with it, and then those tokens can be redeemed. And so I think this idea of tokenization of one's attention is really important to consider how this is going to go moving forward, because if we move into a universal basic income world where people's actual liquid cash assets are greatly diminished or constrained, when you're engaging with digital media content, it's very likely that either your subscription services, or if it's a non-subscription, not like Rockfin, some other online platform, your digital tips, they're encouraging digital tipping of content creators. Those will be through tokens that may very well be tied to one's behaviors. They may not actually, they may be tokens that are not related to real money, but actually on, you earn points that can be then transferred into tokens that can be used to reward content providers, and then that becomes their income stream, right? Is this alternative script-based payment system.
Now, and I want to mention about this alternative payment system. Like, this would be linked to things like wellness behaviors, right? Like exercise, activity, the 50 million merits program. And I can see this, or did you recycle properly, or did you do whatever the things? And then you will have these scripts that you can pay into it. And so, like, imagine the craziness that's already happening in the comment section of these Substacks. But when you add like tokenization into it and these payments, and then you're starting to steer groups and group behavior, and but what Robert F. Kennedy was saying earlier is, we need a kind of capitalism that where people can invest in one another's well-being, right? Instead of privatizing the commons. And so the well-being narrative is really, really central moving forward, is that there are going to be plans for the well-being behavior, and it's not going to be focused on a certain injection type of things. It's really going to be wellness. The marathon is managed wellness. And I told someone, this week, I said, the crazy thing is like everything, I feel like so many of the things I were talking about, they're actually happening, only it's the quote unquote resistance that's leading the charge on many of these things, right? Because they understand reality in a different way than I understand. Like, they're part of a quote unquote movement that ultimately, maybe inadvertently, is advancing all of the things I'm most concerned about. And I'm not part of that movement. I'm because I have my own understanding, because I've stepped back farther from the elephant to see more of what it actually is. But this idea of good behavior tokens, this is exactly what's coming on in the schools with the good behavior script, and I can see that being melded into the influencer, the creative economy culture, not just for journalists, but for all sorts of things, for artists, for immersive experience, for people who are coding, for people who are curating. The newest wonderful fragrances, of the extended reality internet or the holographic reality. Like, all of this will be like, we won't have access to traditional forms of work. Our forms of work will be optimizing our mental and physical well-being, and then in turn getting tokens that we send out into the multiverse to pay for the content that keeps us in the game.
And, this is something, again, it's completely different type of media consumption. But, there are whole other segments of the attention economy that don't have to do with sort of deep investigative journalism. On the other hand, this could be, there are whole segments on camming, right? And that's another kind of media focus where people are tipping out individuals for other types of online experiences. And when you understand that what they're after is actually capturing your behavioral data and how you're interacting with content, whether that be a very compelling investigative piece or a titillating, exposure, that behavioral data is going into the system. And if we understand that the goal of AI is this, that we are all the teachers to the singularity of what it is to be human, whether that's like maybe geeking out on like a policy issue or something that's a much more, physical related experience, that's all going into the system. And then we just have to think about that. We have to think about what these tokens are and what it means to consume media in a way that they can then track our consumption of it, track our metadata, and use it to profile us, both to grow businesses from the capitalist framework, but also to shape the narrative, and then who's shaping what the narrative is, right? Because in Rockfin, what they're saying is, we want to tell content creators how to grow their base, which means they need to give the customers what they want. Maybe not what they need, but what they want. And so then the scope of coverage necessarily, if it's being driven by tokenized profit, becomes really narrow and really.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the hard thing. Like for me, I'm not an easy listen. Like I'm not a kind, gentler, I'm not here to like groom my audience. Like I'm here to sort of throw you into the deep end and say, swim, I'll give you a lot of supports, but I'm not the easiest person to get. Like I understand that I have long form stuff. I'm not super engaging. I don't, I'm not necessarily a customer service person. Like that's not my focal point. And so that's not going to ever at this point I still can be here even as problematic as YouTube is. And I acknowledge that it's problematic, but in this Web3, I will just probably be disappeared, right? Like I will just if I can even get onto the stuff, they'll sell it as decentralization and freedom. But people like me, I'm sure that the audience will continue to shrink. And I mean, I guess for me, I'm mostly doing it to try to do my own journey to figure out what the heck is going on in the world and what this is all about. And so maybe it's fine that the pool of people who are paying attention. But for the most part, this is give the customer what they want, right? Look at the analytics, figure out what got you a bunch of clicks and a bunch of new subscribers, and then do that. Wash, rinse, repeat, over and over and over again. And is it any wonder that most of these social media spaces are super boring right now? Everybody's just copying each other.
Pedestrian, and the reward systems aren't there to be the unpopular person. The reward systems simply aren't there. And so again, I wanted to use this opportunity to come out to Rockfin to talk about attention economies on blockchain, to talk about the fact that even companies that are being framed as sort of in the alt media space are collecting really robust data analytics on their customer base and then feeding that back to their content creators and then essentially controlling their content creators through those data analytics, and then to have bigger conversations about what that means in this moment of information warfare and weaponized narrative.
So I think I'm thinking devil's advocate, they would say, well, they're not controlling me as how would you respond to that? If a content creator says they're not telling me what to do or not do. They say this about the media too, by the way, the mainstream media. They don't tell me what to do and what not to do.
Well, they're rewarded by the retention and building of the subscriber base. I mean, that's on the website. I mean, that their content creators are. Now, the question is, at some point, would they cut off people who were not meeting certain goals? And that is the leaderboard culture, right? It's survival of the fittest. And so the influencers that are getting, millions of hits will be the ones that are lifted up, and those ones that are the less popular, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the less popular content creators are the ones that are doing less important work. And so the question then is, across all of these institutions, is there at some point at which, if this is your business model, you're just they say that you're no longer a good match for organization and let go, and you're no longer in the stable of content creators for that particular thing. I mean, it is a business, and so it is the choice of the people running the business who they affiliate with. So, and then again, it is everyone's choice. It is everyone's choice what media they engage with. It is everyone's choice whether they're not where they put their money, whether who they affiliate with as a content creator. Everybody has choices, but increasingly the choices are all digital, and all of those choices come with metadata attached.
Yeah. So thanks for sticking with me, guys. Let me see. Yeah, the metadata, right? The metadata, the digital wallet, the digital twin. It's something to think about. And I guess what I'm I just want to emphasize here is that for the most part, we're not, the conversations that are being had are pretty limited. And I think they're limited on purpose. And like, there's a reason that we're mostly, talking about central bank digital currency, that we're maybe setting up the token engineering. And, I will just say, as someone who, again, identifies more on the progressive left-leaning side, what I'm realizing, especially after the Oliver Reiser stuff, is that they use the polarity, right, to drive the agenda forward. And it always is problem, reaction, solution. And they need both sides. Like the conservatives need the liberals as much as the liberals need the conservatives. And in many respects, the people who are outside of the game, like the libertarian kind of people, imagine they're outside of the game, like they have a particular role to play in setting up this idea of being an entrepreneurial agent in the game. So we're all part of it. And the thing that I've talked about with the crypto is, I think that the greed of the anarcho-polko, anarcho-capitalist narrative and the FTX implosion, and connected to the effective altruism, is the pendulum is designed to swing back to the commons. Like, the pendulum is designed to swing back to a tokenized cooperative, right? Like, that's the DAO. They're not going to sell these decentralized autonomous organizations as next-gen capitalism. They're going to sell them as cooperatives. They're going to sell them as public goods, digital public goods. And it remains to be seen how effective that is. Ultimately, the token engineering is a planned economy. It is the token engineering is a globally planned economy, which is in line with communism and socialism, right? And so, it'll be interesting to see where the left is on that. But once it's engineered, it will be engineered by the coders, and then it will sort of run on autopilot. I mean, that's the idea behind the DAOs, is that, and then the management of that, such as it is based on token exchanges, right? And that's, goes back to the, let me see, the decent map. Let me just pull that up. Like, this entire huge map is based on, the tokens, tokenized governance, tied to Nesta, right? They're, and I don't know what the answer is, because it seems like none of these things are the answers that we're looking for. They're going to give us this digital democracy reboot with tokens for votes and tokens for money. And then they're going to offer us some sort of common share incentives to share our stories with the AI, and these new sort of digital currency welfare programs tied to, rich investors investing in our human capital, and all of, we're all sending out our social signals that are part of this, collective intelligence for the social good, and we're all sort of some version of, meat puppet swarm robots, like steer antenna head things from Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. And, I don't think that sounds good. And I'm not pretending that I have some easy solution. Everyone's always like, Allison, you don't have the solutions, right? But I don't think we get to the solutions until we can actually have an intelligent conversation about things. And more, I feel like people are just sleepwalking off the edge. I'm not here to police who people are allowed to talk to or what have you. But I would say, if you're aligning with the Bitcoin crowd and the idea is that somehow they're at the frontier of protecting privacy, and you're not acknowledging like the deep state origins of the smart contract layers and the decentralized ledger technologies and where it's meant to go, I don't find it particularly helpful. You know, it might be good for your digital wallet, but I don't think it's good for having clarity about what's actually happening. So anyway, I've got to go cook dinner now. So I will ring off. But again, I just, you know, I will formally acknowledge that I should not have overreached and conjectured about what Whitney Webb might be talking about at the Miami Bitcoin 2023. And, you know, if she is talking about the World Economic Forum and their, you know, machinations to disrupt financial privacy, you know, more power to her to talk about that. I'd love to know a little bit more about what she imagines like financial privacy and working with the nonprofit sector, especially since the nonprofit sector is going to be tapped to be, you know, essentially some of the impact data collectors for these human and natural capital deals that are coming. You know, there's a lot of different conversations that could be had about it. But anyway, sorry, Whitney, for getting the title of your talk wrong. I'm still thinking that you seem pretty aligned with Bitcoin. And you know, I'd love to finally get an apology acknowledging that, yeah, like I actually have been talking about blockchain for a really long time before I even knew you existed, you or your friends, and that actually we should be having some bigger conversations. I don't necessarily need to come over and have them on any of your blockchain platforms, but you guys should have them, right? Like you guys should like be prepared to have some of the conversations, and I think stretch beyond simply privacy, surveillance, deep state, into understanding the token engineering side of things. So anyway, bye everyone.